Good evening, directors, staff, and members of the public. I will now call this October 11th, 2022 regular business meeting to order. I'll begin tonight by acknowledging that buildings within Minneapolis Public Schools are located on the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, translating to the land where the waters reflect the skies, or cloudy waters. MPS recognizes the original peoples of this place and is committed to make ongoing efforts to educate the community about the relationship Dakota people have to this area, both historically and today as they remain here in their home. Thank you. Clerk Inns, will you please call the roll for the record?
Director Arneson.
Here.
Director Al-Amin. Director Ali. Director Cirillo. Director Inns is here. Director Jourdain. Director Booker. Director Caprini. Student Representative Austin. Student Representative Wesson. Chair Ellison.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Next, we will approve our agenda for the rest of the meeting. Director Arneson, will you please move approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Our agenda's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries, and we have an approved agenda. Director Inns, can I please get a motion to approve the minutes before us? Approve the minutes for the September 13th meeting. Has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or corrections? Seeing no discussion or corrections, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries, and the minutes are approved. For our next item, I will turn it over to Interim Superintendent Cox to make the following recognitions. Interim Superintendent Cox, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. It's my honor to begin tonight this meeting by recognizing two recent important observances within the MPS community, as well as sharing about a celebration of a school's milestone. We'll start by acknowledging that yesterday was Indigenous Peoples' Day here in Minneapolis and in a growing number of jurisdictions across the country. MPS marked and recognized Indigenous Peoples' Day and its significance through an event here at Davis, which was live-streamed so others could join us. Thank you to Jennifer Simon and the staff of our American Indian Education Department, and especially the wonderful American Indian families and students who shared their time and their insights with us. We're grateful to have learned about the history behind this important day, and in many ways our dominant systems fight to honor actions and people who discriminated against Native people and culture. As a result of events like the one we had here yesterday, those who attended can better understand how very invisible our Native families often feel. While this is certainly difficult on an individual level, that pain is heightened with the knowledge that our nearly 600 U.S. Indian tribes were here long before any white people came to North America. Giving voice to our American Indian students and families is not only one way towards academic success for our students, but an important way for our country to fully embrace all we are and all we can be. Yesterday's event was just the beginning of opportunities within MPS to learn even more about Native American history in Minnesota, as we look forward to Native American Heritage Month in November and American Indian Awareness and Family Involvement Week. At last month's board meeting, I shared that we were joining the nation in celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. One highlight of our marking this special month was a discussion with Juan Diego, the Venezuelan artist responsible for part of our art display in the Davis Gallery. Mr. Diego shared his thoughts on art and the immigrant experience at our monthly meeting for staff at Davis and other non-school buildings. The meeting was live-streamed and recorded and will be available later for viewing. I also want to add that within this overall month of celebration, MPS has its own MPS Latin Heritage Day, which falls on the second Tuesday in October, which is today. One way we mark this special day was a wonderful family event at my house this past Saturday, and I was lucky enough to attend. We had around 100 families and children attend that day. While the children participated in a soccer clinic, family members from the Latino Parent
oo
Advisory
Latina
Committee,
iyo
better known
dadka
as
la taliyayaasha
LPAC,
qoyska oo
and
ABAC la
other school
yiraahdo
staff shared
iyo
ideas
shaqaalaha
about how
kale
they can support
macallimiinta
one
iyo sida
another
ay isku
and their
taageeri
children
karaan
in our schools.
iyaga iyo carruurtooda iyo iskuulkooda
Everyone enjoyed the dynamic
marka qof
musical
kasta
performance
oo
by
arrintana
Mexico Lindo,
oo
which
kalindo ah
includes some of our very
taasoo
own
ka mid ah
MPS students.
MPS
Thank
ardaydeena
you to
qaar ka mid ah
everyone
aad baad
who helped
mahadsantihiin
make this important day special,
marka
and to
maalinta
the board
muhiimka
members who
ah
were
iyo
also able to attend.
dadka ka soo qayb galay
I
aad baad
also want to say
mahadsantihiin
that
waxaan
while
doonayaa
it's the
sidoo
right
kale
thing to
inaan dhaho
formally honor our families and
qoysaska
our
muhiimadda
students
iyo
during these
ardaydii
national
qoysaskeena arrinta
recognitions,
maalinta la
more important
aqoonsaday
is that we do so every day of the
marka
year,
taa waan sameynaa sanad
academically,
kasta mar
socially,
waxbarasho
emotionally,
bulsho
and
iyo
otherwise.
dareen iyo wax
I'm
kasta
proud to be part of a community that believes that
marka
and is
qayb
working
bulshada
to
ka mid
achieve
ah
this vision. Finally, what? You good? All right. Finally, I want to recognize that we had a
marka waxaan
major
doonayaa
milestone
inaan
celebrated by
sheego
Edison
horumarka
High
la
School
sameeyey
community
waa
marking
Edison
their
High
100th year.
School oo 100 sano noqotay
Hundreds, I mean
100
hundreds
sano
of
waxaan u
families,
jeedaa 100 sano
students, and alumni
arday iyo
enjoyed
qoysas
dances,
iyo dhans
homecoming
iyo ciyaaro
celebrations, a
iyo
parade,
inay ka
an all-school
dabaaldegeen
reunion, and a
iyo
big
iskuulka
pancake breakfast.
iyo quraac weyn oo
I
laga
enjoyed
kanay meesha
every minute of the
waan ku
events that I
faraxsanahay mar
attended, but
kasta
I
oon
especially enjoyed
xafladaha ka qayb galo
co-leading the
gaar
Future
ahaana
Tommy's group
arrimaha
with Pillsbury
mustaqbalka
principal
ayaa sidoo
Skaronic.
kale muhiimadda
As
siiya
you can see, there I am, the Future Tommies.
saad
As
ii
you can see
aragtaanba
from
way
some of
kaa
the wonderful photos,
marka
courtesy
footooyinka
of
quruxda
Jason
badan ee
Norton,
meesha
Beth
taala
Rapsitz,
ee
and
website-ka
Andy
ku jirta
Benson, and the Edison principal Aaron Morney,
dadkaas
Edison
ayaa qaaday
students, family, and alumni really know how to celebrate.
iyo
So much
dadkaas loo
has changed in
dabaaldego
our community and the world of education since
marka
the first
qaabka
bricks were laid at
waxbarashada iyo
Edison.
loo
I
sameeyey
want to congratulate
hambalyo ayaan
the
leeyahay
Edison community
Allison
on taking the
community
time to celebrate,
waqtiga ay
reflect,
qaateen ay
and
ku
renew.
dabaaldegeen
And I want to specifically thank
marka
and
gaar ahaan
acknowledge
waxaan
everyone
doonayaa
who was
inaan
involved in
macdaliyo
the
qof
planning
kasta oo
of
ka
this
qayb
wonderful
galay
weekend of celebration.
arrintii weekendiga celebrationkii
Congratulations, Edison, and
hambalyo
here's to
mar
the
labaad
next 100 years.
boqolkii sano ee
Thank you,
diyaarteen
Chair Ellison and board
Allison,
members
waad
for the
mahadsantihiin
opportunity
ee
to
board.
highlight these three
marka
recognitions.
saddexdan baan doonaya inaan ka hadlo
Interim Superintendent Cox.
Cox waa mahadsan tahay
I want to thank everyone who worked to help our students, staff,
marka
and
qof
community
kasta ardayda iyo
recognize and
communitiga
mark
inuu
Hispanic Heritage Month and
taariikhda
Indigenous Peoples
Isbaanishka
Day
in loo
and
hambaliyeeyo
Edison Centennial. Thank you.
mahadsanediin
Next, we will hear from those who signed up to provide
Marka
comments here tonight.
arrinta
As staff
commentiga
projects
dadka
the
qayb
speaker list
galaya
and
ayaan
our
ugu
first speaker
talagalay
comes to the podium, I'll remind us all of the public comment guidelines.
marka
Our
maalintaas
goal
iyadoo
here
publican ay
is to
tahay
hear from those who have signed up in a fair and respectful way.
dadkaas oo sangareeyay si cadaalada oo siman qof kasta oo magaciisa waa inuu sheego iyo xiriirka uu Minneapolis Public School la leeyahay 2 daqiiqo ama 4 daqiiqo ka dhig ha u sheegin arrimo muhiim ah oo la hadli raaci karo
and do not use profanity, insults, or threats.
marka arrin xunna ha isticmaalin aflagaado
I will provide a warning, and then if
marka
needed,
digniin
I will
ayaan
turn on the
bixinayaa
microphone
haddii
and end your comments.
aflagaadadaad ku sii
And
socotana
finally,
mikrofoonka
please
ayaan kaa
remember that
daminayaa
this is a time for the board to hear from community.
marka
So we
arrinka
will not
boorka u
respond to
maqlayo
new
ay
moments,
communitiga
comments, or questions. If needed, staff may follow up or connect with you based on your comments. Gary Marvin Davidson, please come to the podium and begin your comment.
Davidson imow aniga Davidson baan ahay
teaching students
macallimiin ayaan ahay si waxbarasho leh
Minneapolis Public
Minneapolis Public School baan ka shaqayn jiray
Extended comments at newsalemeducation.blogspot.com. Of the many books that I read each week, none has been more moving than the 1619 project edited by
marka 19
Cole
project
Hannah Jones that tells the story of American history from a very distinctly African American
marka arrintaas oo dadka madowga gaar ahaan
As a person who has a doctorate in Taiwanese history and 7 published books, I am in communication with scholars and journalists throughout the nation.
iyo dad iskoolada iyo dad journalista
Spires, who wrote a marvelous fictional account of
Marka
what a
arrinka-
glorious moment it was when Shirley
taasoo jilis markuu ahaa
Chisholm was elected to Congress back
oo
in
Congress-ka loo doortay
1971.
71
Scholars and journalists in
dadka
many quarters
waxbarashada leh arrintaas way ku
know your
farxaan
sordid stories. And as I continue to update
markaan wado si aan
understanding
dib
the
ugu sheego
Minneapolis Public Schools,
Minneapolis Public Schoolkeeda
current condition, future prospect, your current story is going to
marka
be told as
taariikhda
well.
waa arrinta u
I
baahan
hope
la
you make
sheego
the right decision, or
go-aan
that is, I
fiican
hope the
inaad
new board
qaadataan
makes
ee
the right
jeclaa boorka
decision
cusubna
in selecting
inuu
Rochelle
go-aan
Cox or someone
fiican
else.
inaad
Change the
doorataan
number of
Cox
her,
ama
because
ruux
there
kale
are no good
laakiin
superintendent
qaabka
options.
optionka
Still, they
superintendent
don't
kormeeruhu
exist.
ma
They're all
fiicno
trained the same way. But
marka
know this,
si qaab isku mid
your
ayaa loo
story will
qoray
be recorded accurately, and if
marka
the
arrintaa
evidence
waa in la
continues to
qorayo
mount.
in loo
Virginia
xaqiijiyo loo
Anderson
qoro
is attempting to control this process
marka
through
arrintaa ayaa ninkaasaa
puppet
kontroolaya
Ellison. That story will be
marka
told as
sheekada
well.
ayaa sheegaysa
Thank you. Latrice Cullum.
Latrice Cullum soo gal
Patricia. Julia Pringle.
bingo
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kulia Pringle. I'm with
Marka
Minnesota
Kulia
State
Mae.
Director for the National Parents Union.
marka
And
baarantiga
I
ayaan
wanted to say
gudoomiye
that
ka ahay
this week is the
marka
National Week of
weekan
Action
waa
Against School
weegii
Pushout.
ashanka oo
So
arrinta
I just
kurs la
want to
sameeyey
make some comments as
marka
to
waxaan doonayaa inaan
some suspensions policies that I'd like
arrinta
to see happen.
suspensionka ka
One
hadlo
is a grievance process
Kow
for
waa
parents and families to
familada iyo qoysaska
file a process against the
inay
suspensions that
arrintaa
they feel
raacaan
may not be
hadday dareemayaan
that they don't agree with.
inaysan aqbalin
I've
heshiiska
learned that the
degmada
district has laid out
marka
some plans
degmada
or,
waa in la
or
sameeyo
implementing some plans and
haddii ay
policies that
arrintaas
will sort of
sameeyaan
change the direction of
marka
suspensions.
arrinta
But I think a
suspensionka
better way of getting a
qaab
clear
ka
understanding of
fiican
what's
ayaa
happening
jira
with suspensions is to get it
marka
directly from
qaabka
parents
in
and
laga
students
bedelo ayay ila
as
tahay
opposed to just system folks.
marka oo
Also, a racial
systemkaasa
incident process and protocol for students and staff
oo
when they feel that
shaqaalaha iyo
racial
ardayda
incidents are happening to them. That should be clearly stated, and students, families, teachers, everybody
oo
should
macallimiinta
understand
iyo waalidiinta
what
iyo
that
qof walba
process
inuu
is.
fahmo
Also, just want to reiterate the district had promised transparency around ESSER funds. So would still asking for a dashboard when it comes to ESSER funds. Families want to know what ESSER 1, 2, and what ESSER 3 funds will be spent on. Thank you.
waa mahadsanta
Katie Campa.
All right. Good evening, directors. My name is
habeen
Katie
wanaagsan
Campa, and I'm
keeli ayaan ahay magacayga Minneapolis ayaa deganahay special education ayaa ka shaqeeya marka caawa taasaan ka
While I
hadlaya
was laying my clothes out today, I grabbed
Marka
this pen.
arrinta
That Henry
qalinkan aan
graduate
qaatay
of 2019
29 ayaan qalin jabiyey ilaa
board cut nearly
28
$1.9 million
marka boorkan
from
markuu
Henry High School,
1.9 milyan
leading to us
uu jaray
losing 18 of our beloved
marka
staff members.
18 shaqaalaheena ayuu jaray
PHHS, our
BHHS
teachers, actually
macallimiinteenna ha lagu hayo ayaan meesha ku
some
qoray
dust on it. So here we are,
halkan
4.5
ayaan
years
joognaa
later, and
afar
this
sano iyo
very
shan
board
bar
is soon to be
boorka
responsible
isaga
for
ayaa
giving away a
mas-uul ka
popular
ah
program and its
arrin
beloved teacher
caama
community
oo
members from
macallimiinteena
high
iyo
school.
communitygeena iyo
And we
dugsiga
are asking
sare
you once again
marka waxaan
to
doonayaa
please
inaan
let us
weydiiyo
keep our teachers.
macallimiinteena aan
I hear this
ilaalino
board do a lot of things in the name of equity.
macallimiintan wax
As we all
sinaan
know,
badan bay
boards have
sameeyeen
meaning. So let me tell you how I've interpreted what
marka
equity in
ani waxaan u
education means to me.
tarjumay wax arrinta
It focuses on
sinaanta
taking those
waxbarashada
opportunities
marka
presented to
jaaniska
students
markaan
and
jaaniska
infusing
helayo
them with support and resources to turn the education system into a level playing field. I studied the CDD.
aniga
I
waan
showed up
bartay
at community forums where our
community
questions
forum
were
ayaa
taken
arkay
and
iyo
screened.
waa
Many
la
of my
qaatay
colleagues and my
dadweynaha
questions were never answered.
marka su-aalahayga badan
For
lagama
example, why
jawaabin
is a school that is 92% racially isolated like Henry losing an
marka
entire
henry oo
engineering
kale
and
boqolkiiba
communication studies
99
program and our
muxuu
3 beloved career
arrinta
technical
iyo
education teachers
saddex
that were moved
macallinna
in the fall to the
looga
new
jaray
CTE Center. 3 teachers who combined have taught at Henry for nearly 3 decades.
marka arrinta
Teachers
iyada
that run our
isku daro
popular hero
saddex
robotics team, our Henry
soddon
News
sano
Hour, take free
oo news
professional
hours
pictures
ku
of our
jira
sports
saddex
and drama
macallin
clubs.
oo
They run our
isboortiga iyo
Latino
drama
student
clubka
council, and often one
iyo
is
guddiga
the only available Spanish
marka waa
speaker.
arrinta keliya
in our school
isbaanishka
building.
ee iskuulkeena
In addition,
joogay
2 of those 3 teachers
marka
are veteran
saddexdan
black
macallin
teachers.
waa madow
Director Alamin and Sario,
Alamin
during
iyo
the strike I
Sario,
watched you in a racial justice
marka
network
arrintaa
forum on
waana
March
ka hadlay
9th,
idinkoo
questioning why
hadlayaan
MFT
su-aasha
negotiators
in
had not
arrintaa
agreed to
wadaxaajood
language
laga
around
sameeyo
protecting teachers of color
in
in times of
macallimiinta
layoffs.
midab kale
It
laga
was clear
ilaaliyo
to me you care about our teachers of
marka
color.
way u
So I am
muuqdaa
asking, have you
macallimiinta
spoken to
midab
the
kale
black
inaad
teachers at Henry
marka
who are
arrintaas
displaced by
sidee
this
baad
move?
saameyn u
Have
yeelan
you
weyday
talked to them about
ma
how
la
they feel?
hadasheen arrinta
Has
iyada
anyone asked the opinions
qofka
of
ma la had ma
these
jira
teachers at Henry or other schools
Henry
who will
ama
be
iskuul
displaced?
kale in
Also, who are
arrinta
these
la
other
waxay
schools?
Thank you.
mahadsanid.
I just want to say one thing.
hal mid
You
baan
can
ku
spend
daraya
$90 million
mar
on
90
beautiful,
milyan waad ku
shiny
kharasaan kartaa
buildings,
iskuullada
but without loving
laakiin
teaching
iyadoona
community members like we have at Hannah,
dadweynaha
it's
iyo
just a
aysan
cold
jeclayn
without a
arrintan
soul.
Thank you. Tanya John?
I did register to speak, but actually I'm going to yield my time to Maria.
aniga gabadhan aan u deynayaa hadalkaygii waxaan u dhihi lahaa
Buenas
tamadaysa
tardes, voy a necesitar intérprete, por favor. Good afternoon. Buenas
wanaagsan
tardes a todos los miembros de la mesa directiva y superintendente.
Good afternoon to the superintendent and to the members of the board.
kormeer iyo guddi
Mi nombre es María
wadaagsan
Cisneros.
My name is Maria Cisneros.
Maria
Soy
ayaa la
miembro
dhahaa
del Sindicato Nacional de Padres de Minnesota.
I am member of the Union of the Parents of Minnesota.
guddiga
Estoy
Minnesota ayaan
aquí.
ka mid ahay
I am here today
Porque siguen los problemas en la escuela Anderson.
because the problems of the school Anderson continue.
marka Anderson
Siguen las
problemkiisa weli waa
peleas.
jiraa
The fights continue.
Ya
dagaalku
hemos
weli
tenido
waa jiraa
reuniones con el asociado del superintendente,
We have had meetings with the superintendent associate,
marka
pero no basta de
kormeeraha
reuniones y
ku-xigeenkiisa ayaa la
reuniones. Queremos
shaqay
acción.
but meetings and meetings are not enough. We need some action.
marka shirar
Queremos un
muhiim
plan
maaha
escrito.
ficil baan u
We
baahannahay
want to have a written plan
De lo que
qorshe
los
qoran
padres han
baan
pedido
rabnaa
para mejorar la escuela Anderson.
So what the parents have been asking in order to improve Anderson School,
marka
Por seguridad de
waalidiintu
nuestros
waxay
niños y
rabaan
nuestros
iskuulkan
jóvenes.
sidii lagu
for
hagaajin
the
lahaa
safety and security of our children and our youth.
No queremos que
amniga
pasen
carruurteena
desgracias,
awgeed
queremos prevenir.
We are here to prevent tragedies. We do not want them to happen.
marka
Es
dhibna waxaan ma
importante que
rabno
pongan atención y a poner acción, por favor.
It is very important that you all pay attention and take some
marka
action
mudnaan inaad
Por
siisaan
nuestros jóvenes, por la
ficilnaad
seguridad de
qaadaan waa
nuestros
muhiim
jóvenes.
for the safety of our children and our youth.
Y no
arrinta
nomás en la
badbaadada
escuela de
carruurteena
Anderson,
awgeed
hay otras escuelas públicas de Minneapolis que están pasando más situaciones con nuestros niños.
And the school of Anderson is not an isolated case. There are plenty of
iskuulka
schools
keliya
that
maaha
have
dhibaatada
problems of this type.
iskuulla
Hay
badan way ka
casos que
jirtaa
también están pasando abusos en los buses.
There are also cases of abuse taking place in the buses.
meelo dhibaato
Es
ayaa basaska ka
importante que
jirta iyagana
cuando
sidoo kale
contraten buses se aseguren de que de perdida traigan kit de primeros auxilios porque ni eso traen.
It is very important that you are sure that any hired service for bus transportation carries kits for aid because not even they have carrying them.
baska
Yo trabajo con
dadka
niños
celiya
y
ilmaha waa inuu
siempre me
saaran
piden
yahay
que tenga los primeros auxilios por cualquier emergencia.
I work with children and it is my responsibility to have a first aid kit.
Es
Marka
importante
ayaal
que
baan la
pongamos
shaqeeyaa,
atención por nuestros
waana
niños.
mas-uuliyadii
Porque
saaran
todos
inaan mid
los que estamos
caafimaadka wax ka
trabajando aquí
wato
o que estamos en la mesa directiva o maestros o directores, subdirectores, están siendo pagados por nuestros hijos. Y es una burla que no estén poniendo atención.
And it has become a joke that you guys do not pay attention.
marka
Even
kaftan bay
knowing
iska noqotay
that the
arrintii
salary the all
inayna
get
mudnaan
paid is
siinaynin ba
because of
arrinta
our children. So must we have to pay attention to what our children need.
Les
carruurtu waxay
pido
u
por
baahan
favor
yihiin waa in
que
feejignaan la
pongamos
siiyo
acción
So I want you to start playing actions now.
ficil samee
inmediatamente
hadda hadda hala
Immediately.
sameeyo
por nuestros
hadda
niños
hadda
y
hadda hala
jóvenes.
sameeyo
And our
Gracias.
youth. Thank you.
mahadsanidin
Thank you. Rosalia Aka? Is Rosalia here? Jessica Flanagan?
Jessica
Hi, I'm Jessica Flanagan. I'm a
aniga
Minneapolis
Jessica
resident,
nahay
MPS
madaxweyne Minneapolis,
MPS
MPS
grad,
parent,
and a licensed school nurse with MPS.
MPS
I
and
came here
school
tonight to
nurse
talk
and
to you
caawa
all
waxaan u imaaday
because
inaan
I'm
ka
one of
hadlo
the about 200 employees who have
labada
been
boqol ee
not paid
shaqaalaha
correctly for the
oon
entire
lacagtii
school
xaqa ay
year.
u lahayn la
I'm
siinin
going to give you a
iskuulka
very brief bit of that
waa
because I
xoogaa
actually
baan
use
idiin
most
soo
of my
kaabinaya
2
arrintaa
minutes
idiin
to talk
sheegaya
about the school lunch
laba
situation
daqiiqa ayaan
because I
doonayaa
work
inaan
at
ka hadlo
Wellstone
arrinta iyada
International High School, and as a school nurse, I feel compelled to
sida
speak
school
about
nurse iyo aniga
what's
macallin
happening with the
baan
lunches.
marka
Quickly,
si
my
degdeg ah
last paycheck was finally
budget
correct, but since summer school, I've been not paid the amount I'm
ilaa
supposed to be
summer
being
school
paid.
lacagtaan heli lahaa
Less
maanan helin
on my paychecks. I have an email track of that, and I was
marka
going to tell you
email
all
na
about it
bigay
in a
waan
detailed
hayaa
speech, but I don't want to take my time to do that.
marka
I
waqtigeena
am
haymaya
asking for more communication from
marka
you all
wada
and
hadalka in la
superintendent and
wanaajiyo
payroll and
kormeeraha
HR, so we
arrinta
can know what's
lacagta
going
iyo
on.
HR
Because
inaan
when
ka
I'm
wada
sending
hadallo
emails
weye
and asking like, I got paid as a 50% employee, but I'm a 70% employee. Where's my money? And I get silence.
marka
I have
boqolkiiba
so much
konton
faith
ardayda
in
la mid ah
staying with
macallin
MPS,
la mid
but it
ayaa la
starts to
siiyey
dwindle
inaan
when
iska
I
aamuso
don't, no
maa
one's
waa inaan
saying back to
xaqayga
me, hey, you're
sheego
important, and I get just an auto email. We get a lot of
marka
emails. We
iimaylo
can't
badan baan helay
respond, right? So please try to be more communicative with us about what's going
marka
on.
fadlan wada hadalka hala
About school
dhaqaajiyo
lunches, there's been no movement. Wellstone International High School continues to receive the cold package lunches. 100% of our students are new immigrants to this country. I see issues with nutrition on a daily basis. I see kids whose stomachs are hurting
marka
because they're having
carruurta
these cold sandwiches or they won't eat the cold sandwiches. I see
qabow
kids coming
sandwich
to
qabow
school as
ma
the weather's
cunayaan
getting colder, not dressed appropriately. There will be no
ilmaan
warm
xereen
food
dharkii la
for
rabo
them at
xereenayni
school, and I'm sad as a parent,
waana ka
as a
xumay
nurse,
waalidahaan
as a
naarsa
person that
ahaan
frankly
iyo
loves these young
shaqaale ahaan
people.
labadaba
And also last week there was a day, it was the 6th, when only 20 lunches showed up.
marka
And
taariikh
our
6 labaatan
principal
qada
was
unbaa
still
imaatay
the lunch lady, had to order pizza
marka
from
waa
3
inay
different
biisa dalabtay
pizzerias to
noqotay
get lunch fed to our students, and they all came to class 40 minutes late.
oo 40 daqiiqo ka bacdi inay imaatay arrintaas
Sheila Walker.
Hello, my name is Sheila Walker. I'm an early
Sheila Walker
intervention
baan
teacher
ahay
with Minneapolis Public Schools.
macallimiinta ka
I've
mid ahay
worked at the school district for 10 years, and
Toban
I'm
sano
here to talk
macallin ah.
about issues with payroll.
marka arrinta
When
payrollka
I
ka
first
hadlaya
started with MPS 10 years ago,
toban sano
I
kahor
was
marka
not aware
macallin
that I
bilaabay
should be extremely diligent about reviewing my paychecks.
marka paycheckayga inaan u
2 years
nuglaanayo ma
into my
fahamsanin
teaching career here at MPS,
laba
I
sano
was
ka bacdi
curious about how I might move up a lane.
marka sidaan
And when I
maqaqa
inquired about it, I was told MPS had placed me in the wrong lane.
marka waxaan ogaaday
Based
in
on my
leen qalad
education
ayaa la
and
geliyey markii
I have been
waxbarashadii loo
shorted
fiiriyo
thousands of dollars
marka
because of
arrimad
this
kumanaan
error.
dollar ayaa
In
qalday
talking with my colleagues, this was
marka
commonplace.
arrintan waa qalad
I was
wadda
only
marba
able to
dhacda ayay
receive 1
dhaheen
year of retro pay and lost thousands of dollars at the time. Since then, I've learned to keep my eye on my paycheck.
marka ilaa
On
gabadh
July
paycheckayga waa
1st of
fiiriy
this year,
July
I
kowgeeda
noticed
weekend
another substantial
qalad
discrepancy.
kale
in my
ayaan
paycheck.
dhacay ayaan arkay
I notified payroll by email
b-mail
and
baan
did
u
not
diray
receive any
wax
reply.
jawaabana
at the
imaan
time.
helin waqtigii
Several weeks later, I received an email literally saying nothing more than, "Was this solved?"
marka
I immediately
email baan helay
replied, "No."
problemka ma la
I
xaliyey
never heard from
maya
them.
ayaan qoray
It has been 3 months, and I have tried to
saddex
email
bilood ayay
various
noqotay
people within MPS from the very top to
oo
the very
MPS
bottom to
kor
know.
ilaa hoos inaan ka hadlay
I
arrinkan
want to be paid fully for the
waxaygii baan
time I
doonayaa
worked,
in lay siiyo
which is not what happened 10 years ago. and
toban
it's
sano
not
goor may
happening
dhacin
now.
haddayna
I have
dhacaysaa
exhausted all of my connections and methods of asking for help.
marka
I stand here tonight
caawa waxaan u
pleading
taagnaa
with you
meesha
to investigate the payroll
arrinta
issues.
in aad baaritaan ku
There are many
samaysaan
employees besides myself who need
dad
help.
badan oo aniga
who
ila
don't
mid
know
caawin
where
u
to
baahan
turn because we
iyo
are not
meel ay
paid.
aadaan baan garanaynin
Thank you for your time.
mahadsanidin
Good evening, Board, Superintendent,
Kormeeraha
everyone here
Guddiga
and online.
waa
My name is
mahadsan
Rashad Turner. I'm the President and Executive Director for Minnesota Parent Union, nonprofit education advocacy.
aniga parent unionkan madax ka
We
ahay
partner with parents statewide, and as education advocates, we want
marka
to help
waxbarashada
parents
nin u dooda maadaama aan ahay
fundamentally change our education system.
inaan bedello qaabka
Parents
waxbarashada
deserve to know how our schools are doing.
baaladku
And that's
waxaa
why
u
here
leeyihin
this
iskuulka
evening,
sida wax lagu
there's
wada
a
inay ogaadaan
resolution around transparency.
si sinaan ah oo
Before I
ah.
hand over the resolution to the
Intaan
board,
arrintan
I
boorka u
want to make
dhiibin
sure that we're all
waxaan
clear
doonay inaan
as to why
caddayno
transparency is needed.
transparent in loo baahan
Parents
yahay
deserve to know how schools are doing. Not
iskuulladu
only
ka
so they
hooseyn
can
yihiin
find quality schools,
marka
but also
tayada in
so
loo
they
baahan
can be good partners with those schools
marka
in hopes
laakiin
of improving.
iskuulladan inay ka qayb
My
qaadasho
grandma always says,
iyo
if you
wanaajintiisa
knew better, you do better.
haddii
And that
aan
is the spirit
samayno
of
waan
this
samaynaa
campaign.
wanaag
Many people blame parents for not being involved. And I think air
waalidku
quotes,
inaysan ka qayb qaadanin ayaa lagu
involvement is
eedeeyaa
sort of defined by privileged folks. But many people blame parents for not being involved in their child's education. Those same people fail to mention that parents across this district trust in the school leaders and teachers who tell them that everything is good at their school.
marka kuwa iyaga baalidka
Recent data,
macallimiinta ayaa
as
lagu
most
dhahaa
people are aware
wax
of,
walba waa
maybe
fiican yahay oo iskuulka la xiriira
82% of black children attend an MPS
boqolkiiba
schools
82
do
oo
not read at
iskuulka
grade
dhigta
level.
meelkoodi ma
92% of
joogaan
those children cannot do math at grade level.
sagaashan iyo
When it
labo
comes to students who
xisaabta
qualify
kuma
for
fiicno
FRL, same thing. About 80% can't read at grade level.
boqolkiiba 80 ayagana sidoo
Special
kale
ed students, right? Our children who are receiving
isma
special ed
special
service,
educationka
also about 80% can't read at grade level.
ma gaaraan
I
boqolkiiba
know it's
80
hard
ma
to
akhri
stomach.
karaan
It hurts.
dhibaato
Thinking about the
keenaysa
fact that this district is on track to leave a whole
degmadan
generation of
waa
children
jidkii
behind.
in
A generation
degmo
that would be more
ilmaha soo
prepared
koraya
to stand
ay
outside of
falgarayaan
homelands than to be productive members of our communities.
oo arrinta
The
degmadeena ku fiican
Titanic has sunk.
marka
Give parents transparency so we can help get our children
dadweynaha
off the life
arrinta
raft that superintendent
caddaynta ama
Farrell
xaqa
outlined.
sida
If I can,
garaaf
I would like to present this resolution.
marka waxaan doonaynaa warqadan idiin dhiibo
Jennifer, where's Jennifer? Give it to Ryan.
I won't hurt you.
maya dhibaato kuuma geysanayo
Nate Art Anderson, thank you.
Hello, school board. Thank you for listening.
School board,
My
waad
name is Nate
salamatiin.
Art Anderson. I'm an adult educator.
aniga
Actually work
dadka
part-time
waaweyn
street
ayaan
educator.
wax baraa
I'm here to speak about a serious and recurring issue.
marka
For the past
arrimo
3
dhibaata
years,
iyo soo jiray
the
ayaan
district has not
maqlayay
given
dadka
adult
hadlayo
educators their annual step
saddexdii
increases
sane la soo
as
dhaafay
laid out
waa
in our
socotay
contract.
dhibaatadan
In each of the past 2 years, we have had to file a grievance with the district.
marka labadii sane la soo dhaafay degmada dhibaato ayaan ku qabnay xagga
We have
waxbarashada
done the same this year, but this is not an acceptable way to do things.
marka laakiin arrintan maaha qaab la
Additionally,
aqbali karo
we are not being granted percent increases clearly
Marka,
enumerated in our most recent
qiimaha la
contract.
kordhinayo lamayna xaqiijinin
I will end by saying that many of my colleagues are currently working and teaching because
Ma-
many of our students take classes at night, and so they cannot be here. But all adult
macallimiinteena
education
qaar
teachers
habeenka ayay wax
urge the
baraan
district to honor the contract and pay
marka waxaa loo baahan yahay
adult
kontraktiga in la
educators
socdo
what the
oo dadka
contract
wax baraya
says
kontraktiga
should
sida ay dhahayso
you so
lacagta
much for
lagu
your
siiyo
Thank
waad mahadsantihiin
Thank you. Did Latrice Cullum or Rosalia Aka show up? Latrice? Rosalia? Okay, that ends our public comment for this evening. I again want to thank everyone who took the time to share your perspective with us. We will now take a 15-minute recess. Directors, we will be back in here at 6:15.
15 daqiiqo break ayaan qaadanaynaa
call this meeting back to order and turn it over to Interim Superintendent Cox to provide the superintendent's report. Directors, we will pause for questions after staff provide updates.
All right, thank you, Chair Ellison, and good evening, directors, student representatives, and those joining us here tonight. My team and I have a few updates to share with you this evening, including on enrollment, actions to boost academic outcomes, and the strategic plan. But first, I'd like to share a few items happening around the district and that will soon be coming here to the board. I want to start by reminding everyone that parent-teacher conferences are happening next week on Wednesday, October 19th. We want to encourage our families to take the time to talk to your children's teachers in as much detail as you need in order to understand how you can support your child's education. Our conferences are strategically scheduled to occur once our teachers have had a chance to get to know students, but early enough that teachers and caregivers can partner on planning for the rest of the year to support our students. These meetings are for you and your child's teachers to work together to steer your child to academic success. On our website and MPS YouTube channel, families can find a video that walks through what to expect at conferences. Judges will pause for questions after staff provide their updates. At next week's Board Finance Committee, we will be bringing forth for consideration a few needed budget adjustments to fund the academic strategies you'll hear about from Dr. Fearing shortly, to respond to safety concerns happening in our community and around our schools, and for the construction project at the CTE Center and North High School overages, and to provide hot lunch service to our students at Wellstone in their new place. On school and public safety, we continue to partner with officials from the City of Minneapolis and other agencies to address safety concerns around our schools and properties, as well as for students traveling to and from school. But the level of violence experienced in the first couple of months of the school year, especially involving guns, requires MPS to put in place some additional safety and security measures to do our part to keep our students and staff safe when on MPS property. I share the frustration about this being where we need to spend resources, and I hope these are temporary measures, while our society works collectively to address both the short and the long-term responses and root causes of what's happening in our communities. But I also know these steps are necessary, and my team and I are here to do everything we can to support the needs of our students and schools, whatever they may be. Additionally, as the board and district have called it for many times, policymakers must address the proliferation of guns in our communities. The ease of access to guns has created a situation where it seems we're now learning weekly of another high school sporting event ended by gunshots. This has never been acceptable, and it must not be normalized. There are too many guns in our community, and it's too easy for young people to get them. We need something to be done on gun control now. While the added measures we're putting in place focus on the security of our schools and our sites, we continue to work to meet mental health and resource needs of our students within our schools. From the added student support positions agreed to as part of our teacher and ESP negotiations, to school-based mental health providers, to the implementation of our climate framework, we are focused on providing our students with what they need, both academically and with their physical and mental health. Because I've had countless conversations with my colleagues, I know the topic of school safety has been a front and center for districts across Minnesota and the country this year. As school districts work to protect our students and staff, we reiterate our call to every policymaker and official across local, state, and federal levels to address this issue at a systematic level so we can return our full focus to student learning and running schools. I also want the board to know that as part of our continuing implementation of the academic plan and to support the programming put in place in the comprehensive district design, we are working through some potential changes to both middle and high school start and end times. As we know, these types of changes have many different impacts that need to be considered. We're in discussions with many different stakeholders to understand different perspectives and to process the impacts alongside the potential benefits of any changes. We'll continue to update board members as this process continues ahead of any vote that might be needed to modify bill text. Next, I'll ask several staff members to provide updates. First, Executive Director of Engagement and External Relations, Tyrese Cox, will provide an update on student enrollment. Tyrese, please go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you, Directors and Superintendent. I am going to give a very brief update on enrollment as I have the past couple of months. I want to remind everyone that these are not the official numbers, but it's just to give you a comparison in time where we are today compared to this time of year last year. What you will see is that we are students that are enrolled and have shown up is about 27,756, which is just about 1,300 plus students fewer than we had same time of year last year. Now, again, these are not official numbers. The numbers may shift slightly over the coming days, and I will give an official enrollment count during my presentation next week. So, thank you. So, as it relates to where we are this time of year, each year we do staffing adjustments based on which students actually show up in the schools. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the staffing adjustment process, purely how that happens, not what the end outcome is for it. So currently we are meeting weekly, a cross-functional team of associate superintendents, human resources, enrollment, finance, and a variety of staff members are meeting to look at the numbers that we have in front of us. And those numbers are comprised of students that enroll versus students that register. What's the difference? Enrollment is really an expression of interest. So families may come in and enroll in a school, complete the enrollment papers down in the enrollment center, but that does not necessarily mean that they will show up on the first day of school. That happens for a variety of reasons. We start the enrollment process early in January or thereabouts, and life happens for families. People may move in the city, they may move out of the city, they may apply to another school inside the district, and so there's a little bit of shifting that happens over time when school starts. So we are looking at those numbers and making sure that we are counting the bodies that actually show up. And then the second part of that is, again, who are the students that actually are in school, and that's what we call e-tagging. How do we count the students that are in seats in a particular school? And then there is a third part of this, and that is a 15-day drop. While someone may have expressed interest, while they may have registered, we have 15 days to identify if they are actually coming to that school or not. After 15 days of non-attendance, then we are required to drop them from our registration. The last part of that is making adjustments, recommendations, which we share with the teachers union. Here's what we are seeing in terms of these schools may have more students than we anticipated. This school may have fewer students than anticipated, and we need to shift some teaching staff or staff in general from one place to the other. We make those recommendations to the teachers union. And then lastly, the official numbers are reported, and that will be sometime late this month, October, early November, which I will report to you next month. So that is the staffing adjustment process. Thank you. Now I'd like to revisit focus schools. So last month I talked to you a little bit about 3 focus schools, and those are the schools that we've identified for a variety of reasons, schools that we really want to give a greater touch to support them in their enrollment increases. And we identified those schools because they had space in their building. They had low enrollment, and they had a great opportunity to increase their enrollment. They had very exciting magic themes. Either STEM or STEAM. And then lastly, we have put some pretty significant capital investments into those schools, which created a great opportunity for supporting growth at those schools. So I'm excited to say at the 3 focus schools, we have filled all of our seats at those 3 schools with the exception of 7 seats across the schools. All of them have met their projections. That does not mean that the building is full, but based on what we projected, we have filled all of those seats with the exception of 7 seats. I think that's pretty exciting. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on retention. That is another part of our enrollment growth strategy. We've got to retain the kids that we have. And so the ways that we are going to do that is we are going to focus on increasing both the student and family experience at the schools. We're going to ensure that the magnet theme is evident. When you walk into these schools, we want to make sure that everyone who comes through those doors or goes past on the street, it's clear what their magnet theme is. And so we'll start to focus differently on that. We want to identify and increase or diversify community partners. Who are we working with at each of those schools? How do we support student learning? How do we support the student experience? And who are the partners that are joining us in doing that? And then we are also really making sure that the out-of-school time programming is with intentionality. We want to make sure that every out-of-school experience that we offer at those 3 schools are robust, they're intense, and that they are really very connected to the themes at the schools. And so who's working on this? We are monitoring what's happening at these schools again every week. And another section of staff members are looking at what's working, where are opportunities to adjust. And that work is happening with someone from academics, so we're looking at performing academic. I've done a little bit of secret shopper. Let me go into the school and look to see how are people being greeted, what's on the walls, what's on the marquee outside. Again, that's around aesthetics, because we know that matters to people. People want to walk into a place that they feel excited about, that they're welcomed warmly. For climate and culture, how is that being lifted? What are the communication needs at the school? We are looking at each of their websites. We have done we are doing a pretty intense update of all of their websites to make sure that it reflects the theme, that it has all the current information, and it has the things that would be attractive to potential families. We are making sure that there is a bit of a tighter handoff between pre-K and K. We don't want, at these schools or any schools, but we're focusing on these schools, we don't want pre-K to be treated like a tenant in the building, but really part of the school community, with the hope that those families would see themselves in the schools and register to keep their young person engaged. And then lastly, what are the external supports? How are we making sure that our charitable contributions are flowing into those schools? How are our corporate partners viewing those schools, and what are they interested in contributing, either in dollars or in other kinds of resources? What are the things that they that are experts in? An example of this is not happening, but let's say Boston Scientific. You are experts in that work. How is that showing up in these schools? How can we partner with you so that the kids in these schools can see professionals in the field and strengthen their learning experience there. So that's a bit about enrollment, where we are this time of year, focus schools, and I will come back next month and give you an update on official numbers and what we're seeing in focus schools.
Thanks so much, Tyrese. And I would just like to say the work that you're doing in the focus schools is not only for those focus schools this year, but that are learning so that we can expand the things that are working to other schools next year. So it really is part of a long-term enrollment strategy. So thank you for that. Next, I'm going to introduce Senior Academic Officer Dr. Amy Fearing to share about some actions we're taking to address the academic outcome data shared last month. Amy, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, board members, Chair Ellison, student reps, and the public. It's an honor to be here again with you tonight, whether it's the board meeting or the committee of the whole. So I wanted to go back and still center ourselves on where we're at with academic outcomes. I will not shy away from where we're at. This information was presented by Executive Director Hunter at the last board meeting, and before I move forward in what we're planning to do, I still want to again address where we stand as a district. So at some Minneapolis sites, there's a gap in academic outcomes of over 40 percentage points that exist between white students and students of color. At some sites, less than 10% of students of color, specifically American Indian and African American students, are proficient in literacy and or math. Academic outcomes specifically of students of color were declining before the pandemic, and interrupted learning exacerbated the decline. And while Minneapolis trends mirror national trends, the outcomes for Minneapolis students of color, specifically American Indian, African American, and Latin American, must be addressed. This means change. We must change, and change is not always easy. So I wanted to highlight a few things that we had already put into place this year, and I think I'm not going to read through everything because it's in the slide deck, but it's really specific detailed information that I believe the board and the public should be watching in terms of when we're making commitments and promises, and when we're sitting up here saying this is what we're going to do. I want to bring you along in the journey to show you where we're at. Obviously, we're not at our final destination. We're in October, so our second month of school, but we have made some progress since I sat before you in August. So for letters, that has been something many people have been interested in. We have 80 out of our 80 licenses filled by administrators. 48% have completed the intro, and at the time that we posted this board deck, 35% have begun working on the 8 units. And again, I want to stress that these are very time intensive and work intensive. It is not something you can sit and multitask and do. It's not something you can sit while you're monitoring students at lunch. This is a commitment by our administrators to take the time to be fully dedicated through the training. But it is very promising that we have administrators that are already starting to work through the 8 units past the introductory training that we had in August. We also have letters for our K-2 teachers. That's a different training than what the administrators are getting. So at this time, well, let me back up. At the time that we pulled this, 69 out of 120 licenses were filled out of the K-2 teachers, and please remember that we had offered first to the 8 designated schools that had shown on their spring 2022 FAST that the school was high need in terms of literacy. So we wanted those schools to have first chance at the licenses, the K-2 teachers, and the schools are listed there on the slide. So at the time, we had 69 out of the 120 licenses that were filled. So then we opened up the remaining 51 licenses to 3 additional schools, which are listed there. And then we're now at 87 out of the 120 K through 2 teacher licenses spots filled. So now we have opened it up to all schools. So now we have teachers from all schools opting into this. And please remember, again, for teachers, this is very time intensive. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of learning. And we do provide teachers stipends for completing this work because of the extra time that they take in it. We also have training for our K2 TOSAs. As many of you know, we have K2 TOSAs as coaches in our elementary buildings, and so we wanted them, of course, to have the same training. So they're receiving that either through MDE, the letters cohort MDE, or they're through our Minneapolis training cohort. For Groves, some of you have been in schools where Groves has been happening. I know Superintendent Cox and some other people were in some schools this past week, maybe, and they were seeing Groves in action just to get a better idea of what this actually means. We say Groves a lot, but taking a look and meeting teachers and watching the instruction happening. So those schools up on the screen are ones that are receiving the coaching. They will be provided report card guidance to the families about what the students are receiving and their progress. And we are also completing learning walks in the Grove schools with our content leads and then with Grove staff, just to keep monitoring how that's going. I shared before, and I want to bring it back into focus, that
We did identify some sites to have the option, we did identify some sites to have functional phonics. Now, this is a specific phonics curriculum, and the sites that were identified, again, were identified based on their literacy scores in the spring. And so this training has now begun for teachers. It's a very detailed and intense way of teaching phonics, but we do believe that our schools that have the highest need in literacy based on their FAST scores need this training. And our coaching sessions have already begun in September. Also, press is continuing going. I've mentioned that before, but I wanted you to just have an update on press. Again, all of our schools have access to press. We started first with our title schools last year, and now we've brought in the rest of the schools. This is really your intervention system, our Tier 2 intervention for literacy. They're working through training staff and principals on using a decision tree. So if a student scores right here, then what do you do next? Then what do you do next? Then how do you monitor that? So again, that is in-depth training as well, but we just had our second, I think, training with principals this last few weeks. For literacy for 6-12 in middle school, we do have reading teachers allocated to our grade 6-8. Our reading teachers have begun training in STARI, which stands for Strategic Adolescent Reading Intervention. These teachers are trained in this adolescent reading intervention program and will be using it with their students. There's also co-teaching teams working with our multilingual learners who are, based on assessment, are placed into these reading intervention classes in middle school. In high school, we currently have had our secondary literacy teams walking through high schools, observing ELA classrooms in collaboration with administrators, teacher leaders, and any literacy specialists at those buildings. I've heard really positive remarks about what they're seeing in the classrooms and the support that the staff have been asking for, very detailed support, and so that is the best way then we can serve them, is when we know where the actual need is. Best practices, they're seeing best practices in action, reflection, classroom instruction, application, and we will be soon releasing observation tools for administrators to use as they go into the classrooms, depending on grade level and depending on content. So that should help focus observation and feedback, so that there can be that opportunity for a conversation if coaching is needed. And for our math, you all should know that we adopted a new math curriculum for K-5. So again, I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but you'll see that we are working through our PD sessions. Remember, we did a big launch in August, but instead of throwing everything at teachers at once and say, bye, have a good year, we did just the introductory in August, and then now there's unit training as teachers get to those units. So I'm in Unit 1, I just got that training, that's what I can hold in my brain, and that's what I can implement. Now I'm ready for Unit 2, I can go through Unit 2 training, reflect how Unit 1 went, and then move on. So it's not a big, here's everything, now remember by May what you're supposed to do in Unit 6, right? But we're going to take it a step at a time. And then administrators also have the access to bridges and number corner training as well. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but these are additional supports that we currently have in our buildings. Again, I'm wanting to spend time on what we're currently doing because these are all aligned to our strategic plan, and I want to make sure that we know that as we move forward, knowing the academic outcomes of our students, we're going to continue on this path within the strategic outcome, but that we're going to add some boost to these areas, right? So I wanted to just highlight some of the things that are happening from our external providers that are in our schools, supporting students academically, social, emotional, and through engagement. So we have reading cores, Beacon, and then of course our community ed program that brings in a lot of external community partners to support students at their school. We also have these partners at our middle and high school, and then of course we advertise and we promote a lot free community-based programs that students can take part of after school or on the weekends when our schools are not necessarily open. So the strategic plan, I just mentioned this, so I got a little ahead of myself. But the strategic plan is the roadmap to address the learning loss and will continue to be the focus. So again, these are the 4 areas of the strategic plan. I would say that, you know, often I'm asked, well, what's the 5th area to address the learning loss? I'd say if we stay the course on these 4 and we boost in these 4, we will see change, right? We don't have to add a 5th. We don't have to add something shiny that requires us to divert the attention and the resources that we've already agreed to in the strategic plan. We do know that we need to strengthen core instruction through content knowledge, cognitive science, and culturally responsive instructional practices. And then we also know that because we have the assessments, the information on our students now from September and October, there are certain areas that we need to now boost, which means we need to provide a little bit extra, but we're not going to stray from the strategies that we have in the strategic plan. So these, I realize I'm talking really fast. I apologize to the interpreters. These three areas are additional time for student learning, explicit intervention strategy, and staff training. So the first is additional time for student learning. So we have in our school calendar for students some time where they can come into our buildings, they can make use maybe even in their home through asynchronous models, additional time for learning. So those natural breaks would be during winter break, spring break, and then continuing with our extended summer programming. We had a lot more students participate in our summer programming, and we did see that there was less of a slide based on the number of students that were participating in summer programming. So we want to make sure we're continuing that and allocating resources and recruiting staff to keep that going this summer. One thing I'd like to introduce, and I do want to explain what I mean, is the high dosage tutoring, because now that's become a little cliche and everyone's using it in the educational world. But what we would like to do here in Minneapolis Public Schools is have a high dosage tutoring program available as an option for schools that would like to partake. Now, the difference between high dosage tutoring and regular tutoring perhaps, sometimes regular tutoring is like homework help. Like, come to me, bring your assignment, I'll sit and walk you through it. The high dosage tutoring is very intensive. The tutors are going through an explicit either reading intervention curriculum, a math intervention curriculum, and for it to be high dosage, you have to be in one-on-one, small group, and at least 3 times a week. So that's different than just stopping in after school, right, to your library and having someone sit down and help you with homework. The research says that if you do this, you have licensed instructors or people highly trained in these 2 areas, reading and math, and the students are in small groups, and they get it 3 times a week, that their academic outcomes exponentially increase. So we would like to be able to offer that here in Minneapolis Public Schools as an option for schools that see that as a best fit for them as addressing some of their academic outcomes. So we have released RFP, request for proposal. It is live on our site, so vendors are able to go in and apply if this is what they offer as a vendor. And the bulleted points are highlights of things that they must have in order to apply and for the or send in a proposal. And I wanted to add also, it's not, I didn't notice it on there, but one of the pieces that we are also asking are for bilingual and multilingual tutors. That was also included in the RFP. I just have gotten that off the slide. I apologize. Another boost is providing additional assessments in elementary literacy. So what we're seeing is for teachers and educators who consistently assess their students, whether it's like an actual formal test or if it's more of a formative test, they get more up-to-date information on their students, and then they're able to either intervene or accelerate based on what they need to do. The other thing I've highlighted frequently at these board meetings is that we do need to improve the core instruction, level 1, the instruction that all students get. 1 is content knowledge, 2 is instructional practice, and in order to understand where students are at in content knowledge and instructional practice, we have, with Benchmark Advance, that's our current literacy curriculum, interim and unit assessments. So these are available for teachers to use, and they're good places to understand where students are at in core instruction, in the classroom, and then to go through the decision tree that I just mentioned before that we're doing with requests, et cetera. So we've opened that up, and we've also provided district-level support to schools that would like to channel their energy in providing more assessments to students. And again, these are not, you know, the bubble kind of tests, right? These are interim unit assessments that some are one-on-one with students, some are more just capturing where the students are at. But it's better to identify early if students are not tracking versus waiting all the way to the end of the quarter and be like, now we have to do something more serious with the student.
And the next one is staff training. So we have been, I was going to say frantically, but that is actually true. We have been frantically working on putting together packages for our schools for the grade level teams. So here's what you could do week 1, week 2, week 3. Here's an assessment you can give. Here's some conversation starters. Here's what you should do if you have a student that's not showing this improvement or that improvement. Just so that we have a guide available for students. So if you have a brand new grade level team or teachers from a different district that haven't used Benchmark or Press or anything, that they actually have a guide to work through with their grade level teams. So we're putting those together for literacy and math. Like I said, we are pursuing additional seats for letters training if we max out that number that I stated before. We still have open seats, so we're not going to purchase more licenses till we fill our current seats. And then additional opportunities for sites who choose to implement functional phonics. So we've had some principals reach out and say, you know what, our teachers would really like to have a phonics curriculum. So we're opening that up past those 4 sites that we had provided initially. And then we have, we're in development of a professional development learning suite, one for administrators, one for our teachers, and then we'll have one available to our families and caregivers. So I know it's a lot, but I wanted to make sure you saw what we were already doing based on the strategic plan, and then some things that we're putting in, we're boosting, and we're working pretty fast on getting those boosts up and ready, and for our schools to take part if that's what they need for their students.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. For the final portion of our report, I'll ask Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives, Sarah Hunter, to provide an update on our strategic plan. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Ellison, members of the board, Interim Superintendent, representatives, and members of the committee. So I'm happy to share our, sort of, at this point, most comprehensive update thus far for the strategic plan, but I'm going to do it in brief bullet points so that I'm not reading all the slides. So the first thing that I wanted to share is we will be sharing with you, with our community at the November regular board meeting, our fall FAST data. So we're pulling together the last pieces of that this week, and I think I am hopeful that you feel positive as we've seen some early pieces of that data, and we're making progress. And we're making progress in some areas that we really need to see for students. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you next month. The other thing that I did want to share is there's some connections to some of the work that Dr. Fearing just shared that I'll share. Our teams are working in collaboration with one another, and I think it's important that as we sit up here presenting to you together that we share those connections. So Amy had offered access to our team for letters training, so we are taking up that option. So the school improvement team is also getting training in letters, so that as we're partnering across our departments, we can make sure school leaders are getting training.
Excuse me, just a minute. We're hearing that the talking in the audience is disrupting others who are trying to listen to our meeting. So if we could quiet down a little bit or step out if you need to talk. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. All right. So what I'm going to walk through for the strategic plan is each of the conditions. So each of the 4 goal areas has a series of conditions that were defined as like the things that need to be in place before our strategies can have their greatest impact. And what we've done is, so the format that you'll see is we have the conditions on the left, and then the middle is really like ideal state, what we need to be true. And then the right side is where we're at right now. So I'm going to highlight a couple things from this slide. So this is condition 1. All schools follow an academic schedule and calendar that supports our academic priorities. So we do have scheduling guidelines. We do check in with schools to make sure that they are in alignment with those pieces, so that we make sure students are getting access to what they need. The piece that we're really working on now that I want to highlight, and this is under Amy's leadership, is that creation of clearly articulated core content from K to 8, so that students are prepared when we move them out into high school, right? So making sure that like what you're learning in mathematics in 3rd grade transitions to 4th in an effective manner, right, and then in each content area. So we'll be sharing updates on that as it progresses. And then the second condition on this slide is related to being staffed appropriately. So we are currently at an 8% vacancy rate for licensed staff, And
arrinta
at
lesson
the time
staffka
when we shared this update,
marka
so it might
arrintan
be
markaan
updated
wadaagaynay
between last week and this week,
weekii
and
indhihi
10%
weeka
is
waxa
the
weeye
national
boqolkiiba
average at
10
this
national
time.
average ayaan
But
nahay
we don't want to just look at vacancy
laakiin
rates.
halka
We
ayaan
also want to be
fiirino
looking
marabno
at retention. So
marka arrinta
what we want to be
fiirinta ayaan
true
doonaynaa
is
inaan
that
rusheegnayo
we're
weeyaan
at 90% retention
boqolkiiba
for school-based staff.
inay
We're there in
iskuulka
most areas, but I
retention
believe our
aado
ESP staff is where we're below that mark,
meesha
and
aan
that's the
ku
group that we'd
hooseyna
like
hadda
to increase retention
arrinta
for.
marka waa inaan kor u qaadno
So we've talked a lot about professional development, right? And Dr. Fearing has spoke about all of this that's like embedded in the school year, right? So a good example is that math PD that's each unit. We've built time into the school year, so that's a success. The piece that's sort of next that I think is going to be our key lever is making sure that the professional learning communities that are where teachers are really learning on an ongoing basis and weekly, that they are occurring across the district, so that then we make sure that the content that we're providing in partnership with Amy's departments, it really has a home in each school. And then we're working towards, because of the fact that we have a new math curriculum, all teachers are using that K-5. We're auditing the literacy curriculum. You've heard about that. But the highlight here, for me, particularly given that we have assessment data that is available to us and we'll be presenting next month, is the use of decision trees. So the fact that we have created decision trees for literacy and math. And our ideal is that all teachers are using them, so that's some of the work that we're doing in partnership moving forward. So we make sure that if a student, say, tested below grade level, they are getting that next step that is a diagnostic. Following the diagnostic, the teacher is working to implement differentiated instruction for that student. And then this condition relates to stronger systems of accountability for any staff that are not performing what we need them to do for students. So one of the things that we would like to be true is that we increase the degree to which our standards of effective instruction, so that's what we use to evaluate teachers, and then standards of effective school leadership that we use for administrators, increase the degree to which that's being used as an accountability measure in terms of both at the training level and then in schools to make sure we have supports in place for staff that are meeting students' needs. So now I'm transitioning to goal 2. So goal 2 is student well-being. The first condition is related to student mental health. So I'll just echo what Interim Superintendent Cox talked about a little bit in her intro, that we are, we're seeing a need for students to receive support. And right now we are at one FTE, that is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. So that such that we have more than one.
Hadda ka badan hal ayaan haysanaa shalay
He's doing the job by himself.
laakiin isaga ayaa sameynaya shaqada laftiisa
And sort of similar to that, increasing our
marka badinta arrinta xagga mental healthiga ee iskuullada in mid kasta qof lagu qora hadda 6 baan nahay wayna ayaga ayaa loo qaybiyaa degmada laakiin MPS oo dhan waxaa loo baahan yahay in inay iskuul arrinta caafimaadka loo diyaariyo
in terms of building out
marka arrinta dhismaha markay noqoto arrinta khibradda dadka khibradda madaxa hadda waxaan la shaqaynaynaa inaan abuurno shaqaale
candidates and agencies that represent our students.
marka iyo wakiilka ardayda dhammaantood hadda waan kordhinaynaa arrinta iyada shaqa dadkaan qorayna inay wakiilka yihiin ardayda.
All right, so the next one is related to
marka arrinta kale waxay ku egtaa FM curriculum hadda arrimo badan oo waxbarasho oo kala duwan ayaan haysanaa Derek iyo tiimkiisa waxay ka shaqaynayaan la taliyayaal kalena way jiraan oo caawinaya mental health teamna qayb bay ka yihiin in la xaqiijiyo waxaan u baahan nahay inay taageeraya u noqonayaan iskuulka iyo fanka loo baahan yahay inay isla siman yihiin oo isla janqaadayaan iskuulka marka qaybta dheeraadka waxaan doonaya inaan samayno qaab kale oo ardayda ay xaq u yeelan karaan inay helaan taageerada ay u baahan yihiin oo aan shaqaynaynaa marka qaybka iyaga bilowga maalintii ee xilliga la talinta
staffing, as
marka arrinta shaqaalaha sidaad ogtiin xaalad inkaaran ayaan ku jiraa hadda waan aqrijinaynaa hadda marka hadda position bannaan baa jira 3 meelood loo baahan yahay in laga hadlo oo adag hadda 18% iyo barar ayaan haysanaa culinary xaggaan absorbed waan haysanaa transportationkana 30 ayaan haysanaa marka waa wadaagayna arrinta iyada marka waa arrinta haddii la hagaajiyo way wanaagsanaan lahayd.
And then this next one is about a restorative practices plan.
Marka arrinta
So
kale
what
waa
we believe is really important is
waa arrin muhiim ah waa xagga shaqaalaha
some form of training in restorative
in tababar la siiyo shaqaalaha dhammaan oo isdhexgalka meesha u baahan in laga dhexgalo hadda 6 iskuul baa jira oo ka qayb qaadanaya arrintan marka right center banadayna iyo arrinta dhaqanka iskuullada right center ayaan adaynaa waxay ku fiicnayd laakiin inay iskuulladeena macallimiinteennu access u yeelan lahaayeen arrinta iyada marka arrintana waa tillaabo kale oo loo baahan yahay
I'll move to youth enrichment programming. So I actually have a positive thing to share.
marka arrin wanaagsan oo inaan la wadaago ayaan hayaa talaadadii usoo dhaweysay u dambeysay 41 markii 51 oo macallimiinta la dabkarayay marka hadda 10 macallin 10 nooc site ayaa la sameeyey 3 kaliya ayaan programka haysanin marka badi waa inay haystaan marka waqtiga dheeraadka inay qabtaan saacado dheeraada inay shaqeeyaan hadda waan u shaqaynaynaa inaan wada xaajood la samayno arrinta iyada ayaan ka shaqayno
So goal 3, effective staff.
marka shaqaalaha effective saameyntooda arrinta wanaagga dhowrka sano waxaa weeye waa pathway programka aan samaynay marka arrinta program fiican ayay ahayd sanadkan awoodda waxa aan awoodno inaan samayno 16 macallin ayaan samaynaynaa macallimiinta loo baahan yahay ayaan keenaynaa oo arrinta keenaysa waan awoodaynaa inaan kordhino awooddeena aan u leenaan ogaano hal muhima waxaa weeye inaan idinla sheergalay waxaa weeye arrinta HR-ka ay ka hadleen waxaan doonaynaa inaan fangarayna arrinta iyada muddo gaaban marka arrinta inaan marka in arrin Minneapolis inaan samayno weeye
And then the next area, so wanting to make sure we have competitive
marka arrin kale oo lacag ku fiican inaan bixino waa khasab hadda lacagta kuma dari karo marka suuq uu yahay markii laga wada xaajoodo arrinta contract in la ilaaliyo waaye marka way isbedelaysaa dhaqaalaha arrintuna way adag tahay in arrinta durbadii la buuxiyo
So this is sort of the opposite of
marka tan waa ka soo horjeed marka waa inaan vacancy badan haysano
like we want to make sure we have vacancies so that we can bring
marka inaan position badan haysano weeye si aan u keenno dad tayo leh inaan keenno oo midab kale oo arrintan iyada naga caawiya dhibaato hadda ma jirto hadda wada xaajoodkii qaabkii loo wada shaqeyn lahaa waan haynaa jaanisyo badan ayaa furan hadda marka waa qaabkii loo isticmaali lahaa inaan ka hadalno sidii dadka iyaga ay ku soo geli lahaayeen systemka marka hadda programkeenu wuu shaqaynayaa marka waxaan jecel oo kale inaan arrinta staffinka ka wanaagsano markaan shaqaalo dib inaan qorno aan maagno oo inaan ama kor aan aadno inaan dad qorno marmarka qaar waxaad haysaa
there are positions, but we don't know where yet because of the fact that our process takes time.
marka position wuu jiraa laakiin ma ogin inay diyaar tahay qaabka processka ayaa waqti qaata HR-ku marmar ay leedahay marka iskuulku waa ina dad madow keliya aysan aqoonin waa inaan xaqiijino inaan siino ruuxi marka diyaar ah waxaa jira la-aanta dadka banaanka ka imaanaya oo ka imaaday state kale inay nala xiriiraan marka
systems in place that support connections to the community, etc.
marka dadweynaha arrinta systemku inuu xiriir la leeyihiin waa baal
Active staff conditions updates.
marka arrinta shaqaalaha ayaan doonayaa inaan ka hadlo
If you think about wanting
Marka-
staff to be effective,
marka shaqaaluhu inay xoog yeeshaan waa inaan organization inaan lahaano weye
makes you want to be a part of our system and
oo qayb uu ka ahaado
so
dadkaas
we'll know that that's true.
taas waa run markaan retention haynta badino shaqaalaheena
Related to climate
arrinta shaqada la xidhiidha
hold until goal 4. So goal 4 is
Goal
related to
4
school and district climate.
waa arrinta dhaqanka iskuulka
Site council, so making sure that we're implementing our site council
waa inaan xaqiijino inaan samayno policy ama shuruucdii lagu maamuli lahaa meesha taasna waxaa lagu hagaajin karaa board meetingka sidaad EDA la samayseen
policy, and we did
marka sidoo kale waxaan soo jeedinay la talin October 4 waa hadda processkay ku jirtaa
so one of the main things that
marka arrinta muhiimka ah waxaa weeye raadinayno
checking the degree to which
inaan fiirino qaabkii loo samayn lahaa
because we don't have a system for
marka hadda system qaab lagu kulmiyo informationka ma haysino informationka inay wakiil community ka yihiin in kala mahubno
how can we help you
sideen ku caawinaa
set of schools that aren't, haven't made this happen yet.
malibu may dhacan arrinta iyada arrinta processkay ku jirtaa lankay ku jirtaa
Who are here tonight?
dad badan oo inta jooga maanta oo uu ka mid yahay
Harrisberry is
Harrisberry uu ka mid yahay wuu nala joogaa wixii sida ay u eg tahay hoggaanka iskuulka iyo site councilka sida uu noqon doono marka inaan kordhino oo kale policyga stateka ay la janqaadi karto in kale inaan fiirino kormeeraha inuu dib u fiiriyo oo kale arrinta site councilka ama guddiga joogtada ah ee la fiiriyo oo la janqaadi karo iskuulka arrinta sinaanta
we've had for years. We were in the process
sanooyin badan baan haysanaa qaab dib u qoris baa jiray
the goal is to be
marka hoggaanku waxaa weeye inaan qaab cusub oo sinaana samayno
make edits to the both standards of
marka labadaba inaan samayno
leadership.
iyo hoggaanka iskuulka
This is leadership.
marka dheer classes hoggaankiisa sug marka arrinta u dambeysa sanadkan ayaa la sameynayaa si hore loogu dhaqaaqo
The processes that we use to check to whether or not teachers have what they
marka
need.
macallimiintu inay waxay rabaan inay hayaan iyo in kale inaan xaqiijino arrinta way socotaa
This first one
tan koowaad waxaa waaye
a little different.
waa xoogaa way ka duwan tahay
Implementation of this
waa samaynta iskuulka qorninta
areas we need to be true.
meelahaan doonayn inaan ka rumayno waxaa weeye aan ka dhaafno waxaa weeye
And so what I would offer is that
marka waxaan soo jeedinayaa
that's because it was my team.
maaha iskuulkaygana yihiin laakiin EDA-na annagaa supervise garayna websitekaas marka arrinta iskuulka meesha la gelinayo hadda on track waaye ama way beesha iyada waa la jeegarayn karaa marka waa qayb EDA ka mid ah hadda waxaa waaye 96% way dhammaatay arrintaas 29%na wali waa la sameynay 20% samaynta 3% samaynta 10% weli waa la sameynay hadda sana baa inoo sii hadhay hawsha inaan ku wanaajino waad guugarayn kartaa EDA websitekeeda waxaanaan kuu sheegay akhbaaraadkan oo dhan meeshaas ayaad ka heli karaysaa
And then this one is near and dear to my heart as well. So continued support and
marka arrintan waa inaad taageerto
stakeholder voice structures. So like I had shared in one of the
sidaan idinla wadaagay hadda
to make sure that
waa inaan xaqiijino
structures aren't funded with short-term
maarintaa inaan si muddo kooban loo lacagaynin
to make sure that that is the case for why
marka taa inaan xaqiijino in arrinta
participatory evaluation.
marka in laga qayb qaato raadinta arrin xaqiijinta imtixaanaadka arrintaas
Site-based PPE from 7 schools that we had it in
marka 7 iskuul oo sanadkii hore aan haysanay ilaa 15 iskuul
sizable investment
marka lacag qiimo leh ayaa la geliyey
the degree to which
in la kordhiyo
we're building that process.
meesha xagga levelka la sameynayo dhismaha
And then another
arrinta kale ee
integrate
aan doonayn inaan isla gallo communityga waxaa waaye EDA
continues to support
arrinta way socotaa inuu taageero EDA sidaan haddaba uga hadlay
and then I think the one of the
marka arrinta steebyada aan maqalay mar walba waxaa weeye inaan xaqiijino
caregiver voice
arrinta dadka macallimiinta in action loo bedelo
still have work to do.
marka shaqaa weli taalla inaan xaqiijino wixii aan samaynayno inay
Data that we're gathering right now.
iyo akhbaaraadka aan helayno inay la xiriiraan arrinta cusub arrintaa inaan dhex gelino iskuulkeena
Do right by what we are.
marka waan samaynaynaa waxaan samaynayno
And then the last one, so this is
ta u
about
dambaysa
migrants.
waxaa waaye
We've
arrinta
had
migrant
some conversations about
arrin wadaxaajood ayaan samaynay iskuulka qadada goal one
say that out loud.
marka inaan taa si kore u dhaho dhammaantiin
So this one is around K-12 migrants.
marka arrinta waa K-12 pathway
We are working the
waan ka shaqaynaynaa tiimka wuxuu ka shaqaynayaa sanadkan qorninka suuqgeynta arrinta
some of the schools that Tyrese was speaking about earlier.
waa siduu taariikh iskuulka ka hadlayay hadda in taageero dheeraad ay helayaan arrinta luuqadaha marka dhanka kalena way shaqaynayaan inay abuuraan qaab waxbarasho la jaanqaadaysa sidaan sheegnay magnet team sanadka maalinta dhan iskuulkii marka iyo qaabka language luqadeeda waa la hagaajiyey taa kalena waa hadda meeshaasaan joognaa marka meelaha qaar oo la xidhiidha waxaa weeye magnesan in meesha dhexgalkeena inuu gaaro meesha weli akhbaaraadka ma hayno waan sugaynaa laakiin
Thank you so much, team.
mahadsanidtiin waad mahadsantihiin chancellor ku su-aalayaa qaba
As you hit your request to speak button, I'm going to start with question and comment from enrollment. First, congratulations, staff, on meeting.
marka shaqaalaha ayaan marka hore maleeqanayaa iskuullada waa arrin farxad leh
15-day drop. Do we know
marka 15 waan ognahay ardaydu
15 days? Do we do any questioning?
waan samaynaa su-aalo qoysaska gaara
When we lose students, I see that as kind of we've lost that student. Do we know why students are showing up? Thank you, Chair.
iskuullada maxay uma leeyihin marka ma dhihi karro waan ognahay xaqiiqdii waqti waxaa jira qoysas mararba meelo kala duwan codsaday marka kay rabeen ayay heleen taa waa mar
I can't say that we do it with consistency.
marka arrintaasi joogta uma samayno
You did get into the school.
marka iskuulka waad gashay marka taa ma dhahno weli liistadii waan haysanaa
Thank you. Director Arneson?
anasan
Thanks, and thank you all for the information here tonight.
akhbaaraadka waad ku mahadsantihiin
I appreciate the specifics that you
gaar
discussed
ahaan
with
sida aad u
your
sharaxday
implementation
saad qaabkaad wax u samaysaan arrintaa way fiican tahay si aan qaabka iskuulka aad u samaynayso waad ku mahadsan tahay
the link to the resources and the change of that way it sounds like we're going to talk
marka
about
arrinta iyada inay bedeshay
conditions that you're trying to put in place
iyo xaalka
again to those ultimate
marka kala duwanaanshahaas ardayda resultigooda aad keentay
we're really going to talk about the talking about student outcomes
marka ardayda jawaabtooda ayaan ka hadlaynaa wiga bisha soo socda badiyaa ka hadlaysa caawa waxaan doonayaa inaan ka hadlo qaabkan caawa ka hadalay marka qaabka hadlashay waa arrimo muhima dhammaantood marka waad daba socotaa waad sharaxday muran kama jiro qaabkaad wax u dhisaysaan ilaa 12 ilaa 15 ayaan haysanaa akhbaar iyo metriga aad haysato laakiin akhbaaraadkaad nala wadaagtay marka boorku wuxuu ugu yeeraya waxaa waaye sanadka soo socda iyo bilaha marka arrinta boodh ahaan ma ogaan karno arrinta iyada arrintaas aad sheegto oo dhan ma fiirin karno ilaa 12 page baad ka hadashay metrigeed haysatay eed jeegaraynayso waan fahmay waana ku faraxsanahay laakiin waxaan doonayaa inaan ka fikiro marka boorka laakiin wax yar maxaa hal muhiima oo aagan ka mid ah oon taageeri karaa ood nooga sheegi kartaa horumarka iskuulka ay ardaydu sameyn taasood mudnaanta kuwaad aad ka dhigayso waan daba soconaynaa arrintaas si taxadar leh inaan arrintaa fiirino ardayda waxa ka imaanaya hadday taa macno samaynayso su-aasha waad ku mahadsan tahay marka arrimaha muhiimka waxaa waaye waa timeka aan dhigayno meelahaas ayaan qaasi sababtoo ah waxaa weeye marka meelaha qaar ma dhac karto ilaa macallimiintu ay waqti dheer geliyaan
if we are taking the time to take the fast-bridge assessment and then the following diagnostics, you've got to have time to then plan for different instruction. So one of the things I would share, look forward to, and again, I will say thank you for the question, is next month we will be sharing PLCs are in
BLC oo kale sidii wax u dhaceen iskuulka sanadka in qorshaheena aan la wadaagno taageerada arrintaas arrinta inaan taageero.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I kind of wanted to just repeat everything on the slides.
Arrintaas inaan ku wadaago maraba walba.
I think, you know, the conditions, some are very technical. You can track with percentages.
Marka waxaa weeye qaar waa dib u fiirin lagu samayn karo xagga horumarka laga sameynayo. arrinta ugu muhiimsan waxaa weeye waa arrinta meesha la geeyo qaab aan u samayno istaraatiijiyo oo la aqoonteena iyo fikirka kala duwanaansho marka saa waxaan u leeyahay marka taamka ayaan la jiray macallimiinta inaan la wadaagno oon la shaqeyno marka arrimahaas inaan siino
articulated sequence from K through 8 when you're looking at what does history look like, what does science look like, because again, that is going to have one of the largest impacts on literacy. When your students have the background knowledge, they have the content to be able to understand what they're reading, that's going to have a twofold impact on that first strategy, which has to do with literacy and math. So that would be my knee-jerk response to the question about goal 1.
marka taas inay jawaab u tahan filaya jawaabtaadi.
I had a second to think about goals 2 through 4. So I would say a place where you all have a lot, you spend a lot of your time in
marka waxyaabo badan ayaad ku dhumisay ardayda iyo budgetka.
Looking at goal 2, one of the things that I would highlight is
marka arrimahan ka hadlaya waxaa weeye arrinta budgetka inaan kuu sheego marka arrimaha iyagan ka hadlaya waxaa weeye inaan mental healthka arrintiisa kor waxayno marka arrimaha qaar ahaan inaad dib u fiirino
suggestion for
waa soo jeedintayda.
I think looking at goal 3, it's maybe
goal
similar.
3 haddaan fiirino arrinta iyada waa la mid
program is a way that we increase
marka arrinta iyada qaabkaan u hogaamino
hire, recruit and retain staff.
inaan dib u sameyno shaqaalahan aan hayno
right, like is that something we're really committing to?
arrintaas baa go-aanka anagu yahay.
And then in goal 4,
goal 4 waxaa waaye isagana
but I'm going to say we're going to make sure that we integrate youth
waxaan xaqiijinaynaa isdhexgal dhalinyaro inaan sameyno inaan indhiina ogaano marka arrinta inaan erey idinka maqalo waan rajeyneynaa marka communitiga dhan sanadka inaan maqalo laakiin waxay la tahay
ensuring that our
inaan xaqiijino K-12 jidka K-12 inay qayb ka noqoto systemkeena arrintaas siday u ekaato inaan maqalo ayaa muhiim ah.
Thank you. So, would you mind if I add one thing? I think, we always talk about ourselves, thanks to Dr. Fearing, as a learning organization. And I think we're learning how to do a strategic plan.
marka waan baranaynaa sida qorshaha istiraatiijiyeed loo sameyn lahaa waan baranaynaa iyo inaan fiirino waxaan doonaynaa sidaan maadaama dhaqaaqayna wiga dambe marka waxaan fiirinaynaa arrintan mudnaanta maxaa kow noqon maxaa laba noqoni marka arrinta iyada ayaan sameynaynaa
with that idea of like, how do we stay focused?
sideen
Because,
arrinta
we were with our
ula socon
principals
karaa
yesterday.
qorsheenu
or-
muxuu
yeah,
ahaa
yesterday was Monday, yes. And it was, it was like, wow, we have a lot on our plate. And
marka
how do you
wax badan
help
baan
us stay
haysanaa
focused?
sida
And
stateska loo
what can
caawiyaa
stay on, what can go on?
maxaa
and if
joogi
not,
kara
how do we
maxaa dhammaan
prioritize
karaa
those things? So when
budnaanta
you see
sideen u
the
samayn kara
optional boost that we talked about today,
marka
it's
arrintan
important
markaan
that it is
fiirino
optional right now.
waa inaan
Because we
ficil
know
u
for some
bedelo
schools, they
marka
need to really
iskuullada
push
waxaa
on certain things that
Marka-
might not be the things that we're bringing to the table here.
Arrintan
So
inaan
I
keeno
think
miiska
you'll see from us as we start to prioritize
inaan
things,
mudnaan
we'll
siino
start to make sure that we're requiring things in
Marka
certain
inaan
places,
mudnaanta
but
kuu
other
siino.
things we can kind of say, we can put that one on the back burner as we move forward. So I think we're learning about the strategic plan
marka
also, which
istaraatiijiyada waan soo
is exciting,
baranaynaa
but also a little,
waxay saa
as we
leedahay
go, being
laakiin
able
maadaama aan
to
baranayno
call ourselves learning through it, and not always having the perfect answer.
marka jawaab saxa waanu heli doonaa
Likewise, I appreciate this
Sidoo
discussion.
kale
And I
waad
think one way,
mahadsantahay
as I think about kind of my time on the board, or
shirkan
just
wada
kind of our
hadalkan
history
ku
and
mahadsantihiin
learning together the strategic plan, I think one way the board can be helpful in a strategic plan is focusing our
boardku ku
discussion
caawin
on the
karo
things
iyo
that
hadalkeena.
matter the most to you and resource. This board time is a resource in itself.
Marka
So
boorka
the time we
laftiisu
spend
waa
here
resource
together,
laftiisu
right, can be helpful in
Arrinta
advancing
way fiicnaan
whatever
in
you
dib
want
loo
to advance.
fiiriyo
And so if we
waxaad
can, what I know
doonaysaan
kind of
inaad
over the
hagaajisaan
years is it's
marka
really
sanadku
easy.
wanaagsan
There's,
arrintan
so
way
in no
sahlan
way am I suggesting that we should
Marka-
not do any of these, like
marka-
all of the things, no
marka
doubt, right?
no-
Like,
no,
no doubt
dhammaanteed
that
waa
in the
samayn karaa.
background, you're doing a
dhibaato kama
million
jirto
things and other things that come up that
iyo
are,
arrinta
you have to
kale
do
iman
that may or may
karta
not be
arrinta
related to
iyada
your
waa inaan
strategic plan.
samayno
But one thing I think that we can do
laakiin
as a
waxaan
board
doonayaa
is
waxaa board ahaan
choose a few things,
inaan
focus on
go'aamino
them and
dhowr
talk about
arrimood
them from
inaan
month to month. So
jusgarayno
if that is, telling us every month how you're
laakiin bil walba
doing
inaad
in
noo sheegtaan
implementing
saad
your
wax u
PLC
samaynaysaan
and hearing that
inaan
you feel whatever
maqallo
percentage or however you're tracking that, that's a really
aad
good thing for our
samayseen
board to be
iyo
spending
saad
time on if
hawsha u
you're telling us
qabateen
that you
haddaad noo
believe that
sheegaysaan
that's critically important
marka
to
arrintan
student
muhiim waaye
success. It
ardayda
doesn't mean that you're not going to do those other
arrintan
12
ma
things, or
samaynaysid
12
maaha
pages, I should say, of things,
laakiin
right?
waa inaan
But we don't have time realistically,
hadda
probably,
xaqiiqdii
to get
time ahaan
into depth.
uma heli
And what I
karo
do notice
realistic
from
ahaan
over the years, it's really
marka
easy
sanadka markii la
for
fiiriyo way sahlan
boards, for
tahay
staff, for everyone
boorka
to
iyo
kind of shift to
shaqaalaha iyo
whatever they're working on
inay
at the moment
sameeyaan
because
waxay
it's top
ka
of mind.
shaqaynayaan
But then
waayo
we shift focus,
arrintaa
and then
kadibna aan
it's,
arrintii raadraac ku
we
samayno
come back a year later and
marka
we're still
sanadka
like
bacda
kind
ayaan
of in the same place.
ku
And some
soo
of the things,
noqono
quite frankly, if we're being honest,
marka
what
arrintan
you named in the
maaha
conditions are
sameynay
multi-year projects, right? So we want to continue to do those as well, but some of them are going to be, we're going to be moving along faster than others. But I think that, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is PLC implementation, if we chose to focus on something as a board or renew, I guess, some themes of conversation I'm hearing, and it's okay if you change your mind, right, because you were on the spot, but I heard PLC implementation is going to be useful, tracking that core content knowledge, that's really important to you. I'm hearing tracking the dollars, where we're putting the investment, and not only, and that's starting, and that might be through finance, maybe here as well. And then talking about our K-12 pathways and making sure that they're in place, and that could be really, if we focus on that as a board, that can perhaps advance our strategic plan and get us closer to our ultimate goal, which is fundamental math and literacy knowledge for our students across the board. Thanks.
Director Caprini.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I guess if you had asked me like 5, 6, 7 years ago, to explain the strategic plan, I would be like, I don't know. But this is so well articulated and laid out. It literally goes step by step. And I say this because if I were a parent of a kindergarten and had the opportunity to go through this presentation, I would have a great foundation to work with, not knowing anything about all of the stuff that happens in here or how schools actually function. And so I really appreciate how it's been pulled together. These are all of the things that everybody's been asking for forever. The problem has been is that we get them focused. And we focus on 1 or 2 things, and it just gets to be too noisy. We're not able to get the work done. So this is really well written, and thoughtful and thought out. I'll stop there because that wasn't even part of what I wanted to say. But I just had to spell that out quickly. So of the schools that were focus schools, we talked about the projected numbers and had 7. So I'm going to just name 2 schools. Just out of curiosity. So Bethune and Hall would be one of those, or 2 of those schools. Right? And so, because I work at Phyllis Lilly, so I see the bus line, and it literally can go around the block sometimes. So I know that increased tremendously. And I hear them in the hallways, because my office is right there. And I hear them at lunch and in the gym, and it's just amazing. That's one of my favorite parts of the day. What was the projected number, and what is the number of, what's the capacity of those schools?
Director Caprini, thank you for that question. Unfortunately, I don't know that I have that in this moment, but I think maybe if you give me a few minutes by the time we get through some of the other questions.
I'm not quite done yet, but I'm done with that part.
Could I just interject? I think it's a great question, and one that is challenging to answer, and a question that I have, because I think what we need to understand for each of our schools is, what their current enrollment is. We need to understand what the market share is across, all the students in that area for our community schools. And then we need to understand actually what our buildings can hold. Because, I think all of us educators, and I hold myself in the same space, we have an incredible skill and gift of being able to expand in any area we're given. So we have to really go school by school, I believe, and say, what are we committing to? Are you a 3-class grade level, each grade level school? Are you 4? What is the room for the 5th graders that were, is under current construction? Here's a future site for our 5th graders. So we need to have those honest conversations with our schools, our school leaders, our teachers, and our community for each school to understand where we're at as we move forward. And so that's a project that I really want to work on this year. So we have that set up for the new superintendent coming in, so we have a clear idea across where we can expect growth and where we can't. So more to come on that too, with what Terry's was saying. So thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your answer. A lot. The other quick question, first another, the websites. Super happy to hear that the websites are being, they're being paid more attention to. I can't tell you how frustrating it was to go to a website and just pick one randomly and say, no school, no school, no school on the calendar. When I know for a fact there is school, there's school, there's school, and there's something happening in that building. So and I've actually kind of looked around at a few different websites, so I'm really impressed with the work that's happening with the websites. That's awesome. The other couple things is restorative practices here at the Davis Center. Are those practices being practiced here for staff here at the Davis Center? And then I have one tiny more comment and then I'm done.
I appreciate the question, Dr. Training is happening for staff at the Davis Center in terms of the equity and school connectivity. I think to be very honest, the training, so training, yes, right. I would say all of us as a system, the climate is of course something that is present in each building, including the Davis Center, right? So if that's sort of what you're asking, restoring relationships, et cetera. I think one thing that I share that I think Derek Francis would want me to share is that there's a really intentional effort by he and his team in partnership with Superintendent Cox to rebuild community in this building in a way that at least I, like as a staff person, this is not my work, but I'm seeing a positive impact just the way folks are interacting with one another. Superintendent Cox's leadership is restoring some relationships that may have been strained from not being present in spaces together. So just a really good example of restoration of sharing space and like getting to know who even works in this building is our first Davis Center staff meeting. I think Superintendent Cox shared about. It was here, but it was out in the cafe area. Right? So folks were able to interact with one another in a way that was meaningful to me as a staff member, and I think that's one step towards improving climate here at Davis, which is related to restoring our relationships with one another, such that we can support schools in a way that's positive and productive.
Thank you for that answer. I just think it's important for the public because what does happen here does directly affect what goes into our bodies. And the last thing is, you mentioned the licensed alcohol drug counselors. This is just, you know, I don't know, maybe you've already thought of it, and I'm sure you probably have, partnering with some of these other organizations. And the first one that came to my mind, I don't know if they have a youth program, turning point. Can we find the fund somewhere? We're making friends with a lot of different corporate companies, and they ask what we need. This is what we need. So who are those organizations that we can partner with that can actually come into our buildings and support the students that are struggling with drugs and alcohol? That's it.
All right, thank you. Director Booker.
Thanks a lot for the information. I only have a couple of questions. You mentioned, so vacancies are happening everywhere, right? In every organization. So, of course, Minneapolis Public Schools can't be any different. But I was wondering, how do those vacancies, how will that impact student success, and how will that impact the great information you shared with us tonight? And thirdly, how will that impact budget?
I can start. It's a challenge, and it does impact everything. I think our school leaders, our teachers are doing heroic efforts to meet the needs of students, and I think that adds to the fatigue and the ability to limit our endurance, because this is a year-long work that we're going to be doing, and it's tough. So the more that we can continue to continue all our efforts, we can't be like, okay, we're done recruiting now. Like, we have to just keep going and building, and I think that happens in a couple ways, right? It's our recruitment efforts that we reach out, but it's the retention efforts. It's showing what an amazing community and student body we have, and actually have a school district system that people want to work in. So to me, it's all the climate work. It's all people hopefully tuning into our board meetings and being like, look, they're actually working on these things, or I'm really interested in having the idea of having interventions that are available to me. I want that letters training, and wow, Minneapolis is doing that. So the more we can speak about that into our community and out there at other, like one thing I've learned as being an interim superintendent is the superintendent world is very, very tight. Like they reach out, and I feel very connected to them. So while I don't want to publicly say that I'd like to steal all the good teachers from all the districts around me, you're welcome to come here. We have amazing staff. You will have amazing colleagues, amazing students to work with. But really, I think it's about that too. It's about building up our reputation, as well as providing that recruitment and thinking outside the box with that recruitment too. So lots of work to do there.
So then my follow-up is more of a statement. I think that, as you guys prioritize and you bring updates, I think it's important to share, some of the difficulties that were surrounding it. It's not so much, I think, sometimes that we're not good at or we don't know what we're going to do. It's just that other indicators impact it, and I think that these goals are measurable, and I think that also, these goals can really illustrate the growth and the opportunities, and some of the barriers that we were facing as we were getting there. So thanks a lot for your work. Really appreciate it.
Director Elamine.
Thank you, Chair and the team, for the information. A lot of information today. Definitely an abundance of information, trying to understand, keep track of everything that's going on. Several questions that I have around the information that was being presented. One being the state of emergency that we're in when it comes to our Black and brown children, when it comes to the academics, where our children are reading at, where we're staying stagnated at with science, and where math is not showing any progression. Why are we, or what is the better way? We have a number of trainings, professional training that we're allowing our teachers, but it's more optional. It seems to me like this needs to be something that's required in order to help us to continue on the path that we're trying to get at with bringing our academics up, with making sure our children are prepared for life outside of high school. So that's my first question. One, to me, it appears like we need to put a little more urgency to the training that our staff and what's taking place for our children to be able to succeed. And then the second is being we talked about our stakeholders coming in and the EDIA being a way that they can use their voices. How does one in the community even know about the EDIA? What are we doing to show them, to let them know that this is an opportunity for them to lean into? And then I know I asked a question prior to Superintendent now about our stakeholders. Have we reached out to them to find out what are the resources that they need in order for them to actively be in our community and letting our community or keeping our community informed of how to be involved? I'll stop with those few questions right there.
You know, and Amy, I'll let you talk a little bit about the professional development and requiring it. I think you're absolutely right, and I think we need to work with the scientists and the researchers behind some of these very detailed science and reading pieces. The courses are very intensive. I actually have participated in the letters reading course myself just because I needed to know what I was asking teachers to do when I was an associate superintendent. So we have to figure out a way to provide that to our teachers in a way that they don't have to use their time after school and their evening. We want our teachers to have that time with their families as well, and we have to balance that with instructional time for students. And I think when we talk about being a learning organization, I'm still working on figuring out what that balance looks like and how can we get creative about continuing instruction throughout a day, but providing professional development opportunities integrated in the time that teachers are actually working for us. So I think it's a great question, and Amy, unless you've solved that in the last 24 hours since we spoke last, maybe some other ideas of how you guys are addressing that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That is a constant tension between, you know, the list of items that we have that we want everyone to have training on, to see the light, and fully implement in a few years, and then to just look at basic calendars and look at what educators, especially teachers, are being asked to do each and every day. So I think there's a constant tension between that. One thing I would say, though, that this year, when we launched the letters training, it actually first came from MDE. So we had staff sign up through MDE first before we offered the Minneapolis cohort. And the one thing that I actually noticed increased, I don't know if it increased their urgency, but I will say increased the interest, was when administrators and teachers were taking it and were sharing it with their colleagues. Like, oh my word, I wasn't quite sure about this, but I just joined it, thought I'd, you know, learn a few things, and they're, you know, blown away by what they are learning about the science of reading. And so I think that's one thing. You know, I should not say but we could dictate and say, let's do everything, let's require everything, and let's make sure everybody's taking it. But that doesn't necessarily change practice either. So what we want to do is make sure that what Interim Superintendent Cox was saying is we find that balance between this is definitely an urgent matter. Here's what we're provided. You pick what's best for you as an educator that will help you move from point A to point B. I think having staff have the time during the school day in their PLCs, that also starts to ask the question of what else do I need to know to be able to reach the students students that are actually part of our school improvement plan, that are actually part of our PLC goal, because it is very detailed down to subgroups. So I would say, to kind of capture my thoughts, and I'm kind of thinking on the fly, but we could come out as a district and say, here are the 20 different things everybody has to do by, December. Or we can get the momentum, we can work with our educators, show them that here are all the different options. Some of you are here, some of you are here, here's what I need you to do. But I also believe that at the end of the day, if outcomes aren't changing, we might have to get to a point where it's like, yeah, you gotta do it. But we're at the stage right now where, for literacy especially, MD offered it, then we offered it, we're filling the seats, we will open more seats if we need to. And the moment that we opened it to all schools past those 11, 12 schools that we initially did, we had so many emails from principals saying, sign this teacher up, sign this teacher up. And that's not because I went to the school and sold it, that's because they had colleagues telling them about it, and they were just kind of waiting quietly in line for us to open that up. And that personally, and I'm sure people might disagree, but personally that's how I feel like we'll get best implementation, is when an educator has decided this is what they need, they're fully invested it, they signed up for it, we're providing the support. If they need time, we'll provide the time for them to do it. That's where I see the impact on implementation versus here everybody has to do it by December. That's my initial thought, Director Elamine. I would like to think about that a little bit more and perhaps provide a more thoughtful response, maybe in a board update.
I would just add to Amy, as someone who's taken it, if we can get our cohort through modules 1 through 4, like they're going to breathe a little sigh of relief, because that's what I did personally. Because modules 1 through 4 are very much in the brain research, into the phonics, the systems, the phonological pieces. It's very, 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 very intensive. And I think once you get past that and get into like, okay, now we're going to try these strategies with the kids, now that we understand why we're doing the strategies, that's where I started to see in the groups that I was with and the cohorts and listening to the other teachers from across Minnesota that they really started to pick up steam. So I think once we get them through those first four chapters, I'm hoping that we start to see some momentum build in the district about the course too. So Sarah, do you want to pick up with the EDIA and how stakeholders find out about that?
Absolutely. So I appreciate the question, because I think we'd love feedback on our process this past year. So in terms of recruitment for EDIA membership, this past summer we had 10 of our 20 seats open. So we sent out an email blast to all caregivers within Minneapolis Public Schools that we had an email address for, or contact information in, I think it was June. And then we had the application process open for a couple months over the summer. My email address was attached to the email that went out to families, so I know that we got a lot of interest, because I got a lot of emails to me that then I supported and or sent to members of the team that support the application process. I think, so that's just in terms of like getting to know, whether you have the time and the privilege to be able to spend the time being on the committee, right? So I think we have, through that outreach, we got a higher proportion of current MPS caregivers on the committee this year. It had been predominantly over the years leaders in community orgs, which we still have, right? But I think we were able to increase the degree to which they're current MPS parents, which I think is going to be really valuable in the coming years. But in terms of like knowing that EDIA happens and that you can track the progress of EDIAs, we have updates on our website. We share regularly with you all, but I would love feedback on how we can make sure that we share more broadly that work is happening and how folks could engage. We do ask EDIA committee members to gather input from their communities as they come and be a part of the process, but it's something that can always be improved. So any feedback you all have for us, we'd love to take.
And I think, I'm sorry, was there?
I was just going to say thank you for that information, but I wanted to go back to Dr. Fearing in regards to the training and make sure that it's clear. I'm not saying everyone has to take everything, but I think right now when we have the lowest enrollment, our class sizes are smaller, it's the best time for us to be trying to make sure that we are providing our teachers and whoever needs that training to be able to help our students. Again, I know our teachers are, it's a very trying time and we want to be able to support them, but I also know our class sizes are the smallest that they've ever been, and if there's a perfect time, that time is now to be able to make sure that we get what we need for our students. So, thank you.
Thank you. Director Caprini.
We can also share information about the EDIA ourselves on our own social media platforms, on our respective pages. So I just wanted to make sure that was something that is said.
Thank you guys so much. Director Sorillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the information. It's a lot to digest, honestly, but I feel that we are definitely taking the right steps and providing the feedback, as you mentioned, Ms. Hunter, is absolutely necessary. Can you elaborate a little bit more on page 13? How General Education Leadership Network will function, and also how many middle school reading teachers have received this training, and what is that percentage? And going back to, I guess, Director Elamin's point, and if we have a deadline to meet these goals. And when it comes to high school, if you can also further explain the challenges of literacy at the high school level and elaborate on our plan. And we have a timeline to implement the middle and high school plans. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Director Sorillo. Thanks for the question. I think I only got 3 questions. I might ask you to repeat one. But so the General Education Leadership Network, that is what we're using as a resource and as kind of our guiding north point as we're working with adolescent literacy. So they've hosted a few professional developments for our principals, and then also working with our district level staff, going through, because adolescent literacy is very different than elementary literacy, and I think in the past, this is my opinion, but I think in the past we've coupled them together. So you have a student who is still in that word recognition, that decoding phase, but they're in 7th grade. That's different than being in 1st grade in a word recognition phase. And you can't use necessarily the same strategies, the same interventions, because you have a 7th grader and they have an adolescent mind. And so that's why we that's why we chose to work with this General Education Leadership Network. As far as how many reading teachers have been trained, I'm going to have to get our updated numbers because we didn't have all the positions filled at all of our middle schools. So that's going to depend. But if they were a reading teacher, or if they are a reading teacher in a middle school, they've received training. But I need to go back to our vacancies and look to see which middle schools are still missing a reading teacher. So I'm sorry I don't have that information right now. And then I think your question was about high school challenge in literacy and what's the plan to address that. So we've had some really great conversations. I would say they're pretty I want to say the word, detailed. They can be quite emotional about where our high schoolers are sitting right now in terms of literacy. It's a difficult conversation to have when you're looking at a high schooler who perhaps, is still in that word recognition phase or just moving out of that, and yet they're being given texts that are, 10th, 11th grade, 12th grade level. It brings up a lot of questions about instruction, past educational access, etc. We did have our secondary literacy content lead, Heather Like. So she's been going on learning walks to high schools. Her recent learning walk at a particular high school, she was with the principal, she was with some literacy specialists, and one thing that really came to light is the lack of assessments, right? So you have a 9th grader coming in, but how do you really know where they're at? And then how do the teachers then know how to base their instruction and their text based on the student's literacy level. So one of the conversations we had was about the 9th grade fast track. It's an assessment that 9th graders would take, and I can have Executive Director Hunter say a little bit more about the assessment, but the real point of the assessment is to get literacy data on those students. The next conversation then, which I'm probably opening a can of worms, but what we have had already internally is how do we put in formative assessments for our grades 10, 11, and 12 as well. So it's not like you just take a 9th grade assessment and somehow you're going to be at that literacy level to your 12th grade. But how do we include these continually as students are going through grades 10, 11, 12? And at the learning walk that Heather was at, that was one of the things that was actually asked by the educators was, you know, so they've progressed to 9th grade, what can we give at 10th grade so we know where they're at? The third thing that was really clear, as I understand, was also the ability to provide students intervention or time for them to actually get those skills. If you're at the decoding or word recognition phase as a high school student, sitting and not getting the actual, the skills and the training from a licensed teacher on how to actually start to code, you're not just going to pick it up sitting in any class. That has to be very intentional, but done in a way that understands the adolescent mind. When I think about the classes that I had to teach as a teacher, and often I had students that were at that level, it was quite embarrassing for them to go to a class. They knew why they were in the class, they knew who the teacher was, they knew why they were there, and that's really difficult for a 10th grader. You know, everyone knew what that classroom was, right? So you have to take into account a lot of the social emotional and the engagement piece of working with the student. But at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to teach that student how to read. But we have to understand kind of the context and where that student is at in high school. It's very different than when you're working with a first grader, for example, in reading intervention. So long story short, we're starting with the learning walks. We're also providing look-fors so that as administrators and teams, ILTs or PLCs, for example, are doing classroom observations, they have things to specifically look for, and then there's strategies or things they can do then based on what they see. So for example, if they walk into a classroom and, you know, the teacher is reading out loud the whole entire hour, there are going to be questions about that, because that would not be best practice in terms of taking the entire hour of 9th grade ELA to read out loud to the students, right? So I think, I'm not saying that happened at the school, I'm just giving that as an example of what they would be observing, and then the feedback. As we continue developing our secondary literacy, though, we started with the middle school reading teachers, we started with the secondary intervention for the middle school, and as we're getting into our high schools, it's really understanding where are we at, and then what strategically needs to be put into place that's actually going to be built, that we can build out and build capacity among our high schools, especially with our ELA teachers looking at reading intervention programs and ways that we can bring that into high schools that is, you know, affirming to our students, that isn't, you know, isolating for our students as well. So we're working on it, and I'll continue to give you updates as our secondary content lead is doing that work. Did I get all your questions?
Okay, sure. One more thing to that, because I think you've talked a lot about the reading intervention piece of it, which is really important for our students. But at the same time, when we get to the high school level, they also have to have access to the curriculum and the materials, right? So we can't depend on them to learn how to read in the next month and then be able to access all the content they need for comprehension of the academics that they're doing. So it really is a twofold approach, in my opinion, about the reading intervention, as well as having adaptations and access to materials, such as, you know, being able to have our textbooks on tape, right, so kids can listen, having visual notes in different ways. So there's lots of strategies, and, you know, coming from my special education background, and I see our executive director of special education in the audience, it really is about that idea of universal design for learning. Because we need to look at all the areas of access, how to get the information, and also how to share that you know the information. So I think that would also be a big design feature as we're looking at revamping what we're doing at the high school level.
Thank you. I do have another question. When it comes to tutoring, and we had this conversation before, why do we believe that online approach will work?
Marka online-ka ma shaqeynayo maxaanu aaminsanahay
in online learning, especially. I mean, that's a proven fact, right? So, also, do all students have access to devices to
ardayda
participate in
dhan
tutoring?
device computer ma haystaan si
And why tutoring is not in person? I
tuurka
just want to have this
muxuu
clarification
macallin
and
face
be
to
out
face
loud
u
and
noqon waaye
clear for
arrintaa
a lot
waxaan
of our
doonayaa
parents
inay
that
toos
do have these questions.
loo
Thank you.
maqlo oo cod dheer aad ku sheegto
I can start. So I think there's a couple reasons why we started.
dhowr
And I
sababood
would say,
ayaan arrintaa u
again,
sameynay
an optional academic boost is not
marka
saying that a
waxbarashada
school couldn't
korinteeda
start their
iskuulka oo
own
kale
tutoring
ma aha
program in person, or that we
marka
could utilize one of our many community organizations
marka
that provide that.
community
I think
organizationada
when we
way
were looking for a
sameynayaan
strategy to use, we were
marka
looking at
waxaan
one
malayaa
that took into
istaraatiijiyada inay
place one that we could
sameynayaan
implement with the staffing shortages we have
oo
right now.
shaqaalaha
So we
yaraantiisa aan
know just
haysano
adding extra allocations to a
marka
school at this point,
waqti dheeraada
we
inaan u
can't
sameyno
staff them, so that's not really
hadda ma
helpful for them.
bilaabi karno hadda ma caawinayso
We know that when we look at this,
hadda
we need
markaan
people who
fiirino
are really trained
arur
to
tababarka
do the
macallimiinta
curriculum and the
arrintaa iyada
intervention.
inay
And
sameeyaan
that takes
faragelinta
time, and that takes
waqti
energy,
bay qaadan
and
energy bay
um,
qaadan
so when we think about in-person people to
markaan
help with
macallin
this,
face
I
to
think
face
Amy and I
fiirino
envision that as I'm doing the online,
marka
let's
online-ka
say
maadaam
my teacher's
sameynayo
having reading
macallinkayga
groups, and one of the
waqti
reading groups is a
akhrisbad
group of us are going to
marka
be
kuwa
visit
kale
with the
waxaa waaye
online
busy wuxuu ku
tutor
yahay online
that
tutorka
Ms. Caprini here might be a volunteer in the classroom,
marka
and she
Gabriel
might go with
volunteer
us to
way
keep us
inala
engaged in it, help us with any
inala
tech
aado inay
issues,
naga caawiso arrinta
give us a lot of
teknolojiyada
encouragement as we're going, but
dhiirigelin
she's
la
not
siiso
responsible for the
laakiin
curriculum part or the
mas-uul kama
intervention.
aha arrinta
So
curriculum
I think we were looking for a
marka hadda waxaan
strategy as
fiirinayna
we
waxaa
were
waynaa
looking at
qaab
this boost that
aan
we could put
arrintan
into
ku
place
weyneyn
with the
karno
staffing that we have right now, utilizing our families and our community organizations in a
oo
way that
arrintaas
helps our
ay ka
students
qayb
engage
qaataan
in it that we've
familitiga
never
iyo
had
dadweynehena
before, as well as
weligeen
have all the
aysan noqonin ay
pieces
uga qayb
with
qaataan
that online of the dashboard, so a teacher can go back
marka
and say,
macallinku
how'd that go
dashboardka
at the
inuu
end of the day,
fiiriyo
rather than
arrintaas ay
having to check
aaday
in with 4 volunteers
marka
or 4
volunteerinka la
tutors at
fiirin
the end of
lahaa
the day, or have to call the community organization.
ama
It
community
also
organization loo
honestly
yeeri
gives
lahaa
us also a way to say, is
xaqiiqdii
this really an investment we want to keep going with?
arrintan
Is it really
marka
working for
dhiirigelin
kids?
may
And
noo
so I need a
shaqaynaysa
way to
ciyaalka
quickly be able to do that
marka
as we're
inaan
helping
sida
build
ugu
a
dhaqsa
budget for the
badan
next school
sameeyo
year and the next
budgetka
superintendent.
sameeyo
So when I do that
oo
handout,
kormeeraha
I can say,
cusub
here's the strategy, here's what
qaabkan
happened,
ayaa
here's what
dhacay
we think we
sidan
are, we
ayaanu
got A mixed
shaqaynaynay
results, or we've got really
jawaabtaan
positive
helay
results
tanay
here, or
noqotay
wow, Rochelle really had kind of a not a great idea. And so
fikrad
that's
fiican
okay, we can be nimble to think about that.
marka
So
waan ka
Amy, do you have
fikiri
anything to
karaa
add about that?
marka wax dheeraad haddaad ku darayso adi waaye
That and I would say it's a both and. What we're looking for
marka
is
waxaan
a
fiirinayna waxaa
vendor
waaye
or an organization that
hay-ad ama
can
ka qayb
provide the part that we
qaadanaysa
can't, right?
oo
So we still
bixisa
would say, and it says very clearly in the research, the best
qaabka ugu
academic
fiican
outcome you
ee
will get from is
waxbarasho
from
helayna
in
waxaa
person,
weeye
having a tutor
in
with you one-on-one or in
shaqsigii
groups
loo
of 3
baro
or less.
oo
But we
saddex oo
also
ka
know the
yar
reality is, you know, like we had
xaqiiqadana waa
stated, we
inaan
still have
ogaano
some
waxaa
schools that
weeye
don't have after-school programming because
school
we don't
program
have staff,
haysano
right? So if we said
shaqaalo
the
ma
tutoring
haysano
program is you go out and find tutors that
idinku
are there
raasa haddaan
3
dhahno
days a week, you know, with the
weekii
students in a small
saddex
group,
beri
we would just be
group
setting
yar
schools up, right? And
marka
that's not
iskuulka ma
our,
daraynaa
or at least
arrintaana
that's not what I would envision. So
waxaan
the proposal that
raadinayna
we
ma aha
expect to
waxaan
see,
soo
and there's a few
jeedinayna waxaa
vendors
waaye
that are out there already.
dhowr
from
arrimood
research,
ayaa
but
banaanka
I
jooga
haven't
arrinta
contacted
iyada
them.
weli lamaana
But that
xiriirin
are out there, they provide the both. They
laakiin waxay
provide the, here's
bixiyaan
a tutoring management system. They also
arrinta
have training for
tutorinka
tutors. So
way
anyone who
bixiyaan
wants to come in
qof
person and be a
kastoo
tutor,
doonay
they
inuu
can go
imaado
through this
way
module, learn
aadi
how to be a good tutor, you
qaabkaas
know.
ay sidii
And
usoo
then they have a management
macallin u
system
noqon
where,
karo
you know,
qaab
the tutors
maamulna
can
waan
put in the
leenahay
information, the students they support
tutorinka
it, and the
ay
administrator
information
would then have
gelinayaan
access to that. To
marka
say, oh, yeah,
kormeero
this
uu
student is
ogaan
staying
karo
3 days a
ardaygu
week, this is what they're getting.
saddex beri ayuu
The
helaa
vendors that I've
waxaan
also
heshaa
have looked at also actually
marka
have intervention
kambaniguna
curriculum
hayaan
that's aligned to
qaab
the science of
faragelinta
reading. So
waxbarashada
instead of asking the
marka
next door
halkii
neighbor who's coming in to volunteer to be a tutor, to teach a tier 2 intervention to a student versus homework help, their online tutors actually have that training and can do that. Now again, it doesn't take the place of someone coming in person. We'd love to have it in person. But I just know that the staffing capacity and where we're at, we just can't depend on every school having a plethora of resources. But again, I would like to stress, if there are community orgs and people, our community that would like to do it, please let us know, because that would be our first choice. But we also wanted to have a both and for schools, so that, if they are short support staff or their support their interventionists, instead of the student just sitting there, well, at least you can be with an online tutor that's doing doing some reading
inuu hawsha u qabto xagga
and to
akhriska oo
support
kale
that. So,
inaan
and
ku
again, it's an
taageero
option. We might have some
laakiin
schools
waa
say we have
option
our own thing going.
xal
we're
kale
good, we
ayaan
don't
heli
need
karnaa
it.
waan
Okay, but
fiicannahay
we
uma
also probably have
baanin
some schools that be like, thank you so much for
marka
setting this up.
iskuullada
We,
qaar
you
waad
know, all we have to
mahadsantihiin
do is
inaan
go
dhahno
in and
kale
registering and get started. So both and, but definitely in person would be.
labadaba waa dhan laakiin
Yeah,
in
and I
person
would
waa
just say
sidoo kale
too that we
muhiim
want to make sure that, of course, our teachers are the best teachers of our students. So making
marka
sure that they have
macallimiinteenu
opportunities
waa
for
macallimiinta ugu
after-school
fiican
learning
ee ardayda
programming and
qaabka
working with our principals
waxbarasho
if there are any
kormeeraha la
teachers who want to do that,
shaqaynaya
of course. That's number one.
taas waa nambarka
Again, just
koowaad
wanting to make sure, as we talked about before, that our teachers have that ability to not have to feel pressure to do that
macallimiinteenu inay
or
awoodda
to make
leeyihiin ee
those
barasha lagu
choices
siinin
to
inay go-aan
be home with
gaaraan
their families. We want to honor that too. So
waa inaan
that's really
xushmayno
a balance that
qoysaskooda
we're
oo
trying to
kale
do.
The last question that I asked, so all of our students who have access to devices, all of our students do, so that they can benefit from tutoring?
Yeah, we'll look to the side row of our senior officer Justin Hennis can answer and tell us where we're at with our student devices.
marka kombuyuutarada iyo inaan haysanin in kale ka jawaab adigu
Board directors, superintendent,
guddiga kormeeraha
everybody here in
qof
attendance.
kastoo meesha jooga kuwa online ka naga wanaagsanaya iskuullada kombuyuutarada way shaqaynayeen ardayda dhammaanta ilaa iskuulka markii la bilaabay badanka ardayda way haystaan kombuyuutarada kuwa kalena waa laga shaqaynayaa in la siiyo marka sidoo kale waan dib uba sameynaa markuu jabo oo kale marka technologyga siday u sameeyaan marka qaabka online-ka ayay sameeyaan teknolojiyada iyo qaabka loo baahan yahay oo dhan waa diyaar
Thank you. Director Ali?
Ali.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gudoomiye waad mahadsan tahay su-aal baan qabaa
I can ask you.
aan weydiin kara dhammaantiin
I remember back then, sometime 2014, 2013, before I joined the board, there used
saddex iyo
to
tobankii
be
afar iyo
some online
tobankii
tutoring.
intaana kula kulmin
MPS had
oo tutoring baa
contract
jirtay
with some companies
oo kambaniyo MPS ay la
outside
siisay
Minneapolis.
oo Minneapolis ka baxsan
What did you guys learn from that?
maxaad ka barateen kuwaas
Thanks for the question. I will admittedly say I was a principal at that time, and
Well,
I
I'm
did know there was an
Kormeeraha
online tutoring
marka
system
mana ogeyn inuu jiray
available because we had a pretty robust tutoring
marka
program
tutoring
specifically
program
at
ayaan
Wellstone.
haysanay
So I'd have to
Wellstone
get back to you unless there's someone here
waan kula soo hadli doonaa
in
arrinta
terms of
iyada
Superintendent Cox that can answer the
marka
question.
qof ka jawaabi kara inuu jira ma aqaano laakiin maba ogeynba arrinta markaan maamulaha inay jirtay in kaleba ma ogeyn
comment on that.
Maybe then it's worth for you to spend some time and find out why we had contract with those companies, what did not work, what did work out.
marka dib u fiiriyo maxaa shaqeeyey
Institutional information is very important.
maxaa shaqeynin
Before we try to
informationkeena
implement meetings.
aad buu muhiim u yahay
Secondly, we have to also make sure, it's easy to say online tutoring than
tutoring waa
practicality.
arrinta iyada
We have so many families who are not necessarily, they don't have even internet here.
internet kuwaan haysanin baa jira hataa
And
qoysas
we don't want to drop the ball again. You
marka
see?
banooniga inuu naga dhaco
So
ma
it's
rabo
very
ma rabno
important that we have to spend time and
waqti inaan
look for
gelino weye
resources
inaan
here.
fiirino resources
What can we have in person tutoring? We have so many teachers.
macallimiin
We can
meli karaa macallimiin way jiraan
kind of like, our own teachers can work evening. to
habeenkii
make
hadday shaqayn
extra
karaan macallimiinteena
money or
si
whatever the case is.
lacag
They
dheeraada
can-
loo
they can
siiyo oo
work for
kale
us,
inay noo shaqeeyaan oo kale
instead of online and we don't know someone somewhere else.
ruux
we
kale
use
oo
today's
waxbaraya
technology.
aanan ogeyn
We need to be
teknolojiyadaas
careful. We need to make sure
waa inaan
that
xaqiijino
these
waxaas
children
uu
are
yahay
learning.
caruurta inay
Many
baranayaan
parents are
xaqiijino
not
weye
educated enough to know about what their
familada
kids doing.
waxbarasho ma yaqaanaan qaarkood
Are they really learning? Are they
ilmaha waxay
engaged?
samaynayaan ma
So
ogo geemina
those
ciyaar
are
inay
very,
wax
very
barayaan
important, you know.
arrinta arrin muhiima waaye
Every time we look information or resources, we have to look
mar
within
kasta oo
within
aan wax
our, let's say,
raadinayno waa
within the
inaan
local
Minnesota waa inaan ka
For
raadino
example, if you
example
are looking for
tusaale
students in school
haddaan
where
arday school
the students are, say, 25% Latino,
boqolkiiba
for
25
example,
Spanish
25% of the students are Somali,
tobankiiba boqol
25%
Soomaali
of the students are native.
iyo boqolkiiba
Giving some
Albanian
examples. You have to look information and resource from Latino community
waa inaan Latin
before you,
community ka fiiriso
before you try to issue RPF and say that RFP and say we are looking for, you know, all those,
kale
you know,
ayaan ka
those
raadinaynaa intaan dhihi lahayn
website high-level consultancies will be
marka
coming
oo
and decide that.
leesaar iyo
We
consultant
have to
balay
look
imaanaysa
resources within.
magaalada inaan wax ka
And
raadino
we are
waaye
behind when it comes to the tutoring. We have been behind.
arrintaa waan ku
And I
dambaynaa
hope now, whatever we learned in the past, we
aan baranay horay taariikhdii aan ka soo
it can help
baranay
us.
inay
So
caawin
that's
karto
my 2 cents. I like to
labadaas
share with
ayaan
you.
rabay inaan ka sheer gareeyo
And thank you, Madam Chair.
waadna mahadsantahay guddoomiye
Director Elamine.
Yeah, just a few more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, when we talk about the student learning, the
Marka
winter break,
waxbarashada
the
ka
spring break,
hadlayno
and the
spring
additional
break
summer programming,
ee
is that
xilliga
something that's
summer
offered to all
marka
students?
dadka dhan ma la
How do we
siiyaa
access that? And
sidee
then
baan ku
my
ogaanaa arrintaas
next question would be, I know when it comes to staffing, it was mentioned that we are at 8% nationwide,
marka
it's
boqolkiiba
10%.
8 ayaan nahay
So
nationwide
it says that we're not too far off from
Marka ma
the numbers
fogin.
when it comes to the vacancy.
marka
Does that mean
vacancy
some of
marka
our
la
schools
fiiriyo
are
ardayda
overstaffed
iskuuladeena
and some of our
qaar
other
waa
schools are understaffed?
macallimiin
Because
badan
I
baa
hear a
jooga
lot
qaarna
from the
macallimiin
community
yar
that
baa jooga
we
kuwa kale
don't have
marka waxaan
enough staff
maqlayaa
in
shaqaalaha
our
ku filan
schools.
ma haysan
So
iskuulkeena
I guess I'm trying to understand a
marka
little
inaan
better
fahmaan doonayaa
just how our staffing, how we
shaqaalaheena
are
sida
proportioned
ay u
across the
qaybsan
board when it
yihiin
comes to our schools.
markay iskuullada loo fiiriyo
I can start and feel free to chime in. I think you're right, and as
Arrintaa waad
Tyrese
saxan tahay.
shared, staffing adjustment is one way we do that. When we look at the
Shaqaalaha
enrollment of each of our
arrintaa markaa
schools, we make
fiirinayso
projections
matiga
in
ayaa la
spring, we
fiiriyaa
look at that at fall. We also give our schools a lot of autonomy with money. and how
awoodna
they
waa
spend their
siinaa
budget.
iskuullada
So you won't see consistency of what staffing looks like in every school. We do have what we call
marka
predictable
iskuulladu inay isku wada
staffing,
mid
which
yihiin ma arkaysid
ensures our community, our families,
marka
our staff
qoysaska iyo
of
shaqaalaha
what
iyo
should be and
dhammaantood
is at every one of our schools. And that includes things like a principal,
oo
a
ilaa
social worker, a
maamulaha
school
social worker
secretary,
secretary
the number of teachers that are in the
macallimiinta
building,
tiradooda
a counselor. So those things
kansalayaasha
are predictable across our schools.
marka
But
arrimaha
there
la
are many
fiiri
things
karo
that are
weeye
not predictable, and based on what instructional leadership teams, based on what site councils
iyo site
and
council uu
principals as
yahay
leaders of their schools
iyo
decide to do
macallimiinta
with the money that they have from the different funding sources that they're given as we look at budgets. Anybody else wants to add? I think there was something else I was going to say about
wax kaloo dhihi rabay waan
I
laqay
would just say about the tutoring program. I think one of
arrinta
the things is
tutoringka
as Dr. Fearon and I were looking at the
marka
research,
waxaan raadinaynaa
one
waxaa
of the
weeye
really
research
interesting things is that the
cilmi baaris
effectiveness
leh
of the tutoring programs goes up if
saamaynta
it's
ay leedahay
actually
kor
during the
bay u
school day,
kacday
which is
haddii xilliga
really
iskuulka
interesting
ay
to us
tahay
as we were looking at
kor
that.
bay u
I do
kacday
think as I've reached out to community
markaan
organizations
dadweynaha
and
gaaray
community
iyo
partners,
aan la
as you
hadalay
talked about, Director Ali,
cali
you
aan
know,
la
one of the
hadalay
things they've been engaging with us is, you know, we can do the homework help piece,
Homework
but
waan
the
caawin
intervention
karaa
piece and understanding the
laakiin arrinta
curriculums we're
fahamka
using,
iyo
we don't
arrinta
have that
fahamkeeda
knowledge. And so I
aqoonta ma
think that's
jirto
one of the things we've got to look at as we're prioritizing what we're doing
maadaama
over
mudnaanta
the next
siinayno
months is when
arrinta
we do
bisha
have
dambe iyo
community
wax sameyn
organizations, how do we help them understand
sidee baan u
and be
caawinaa in la
knowledgeable
fahmo
in what we are teaching our students?
macallimiin waxaan barayna
That's a
dadka
big lift as we move forward. So
oo ay fiican
Dr.
tahay
Alvin, I'm
maadaama
not
aan
sure
kor
I
u
caught
kacayno
every one of the questions that you have. So
Just about the winter break, spring break.
yeah, I'll
summer
let
programming.
Dr. Fearing talk about registration for that.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Currently, our teams are working on planning.
tiimkana waa ka shaqaynayaan qorshaha arrinta
one
iyada
of the main considerations is staffing.
arrinta shaqaalaha weeye waxaa laga hadlayo kow
What's interesting is this winter break, we'll be able to have, I hope I'm right, but we'll be able to have 4 or 5 days of consecutive programming, which in years past you have 3
marka
midweek
4 ilaa 5 isku
So
xigto
this year we'll
programmingka
actually be able to have all
ayaa la
the students
sameynayaa
in the
tan
program one
ardayda
week, which
dhan
might
oo
make it
haraysa
easier to get staff. If you're
arrintaa
not
way
committing
noo
to 3 days,
sahlanaan
then we
doontaa
can
inaan
take off the
sameyno
next week, right, for a break. So we'll see about that. If nothing
waan
else,
fiirinaynaa arrintaa
our
haddaysan arrin
plan
kale qorshaha ku
B
jirin
maybe is that we'll continue to offer asynchronous
marka
offerings, but you know, if we
wax la
are
mid
unable
ayaan
to get
sameynaynaa
staff or community organizations or
marka oo
the people
wakiilada
that have
hay-adda
generally come in
iyo
and
dadka
supported our
dhammaan
schools and our
imaada oo
students during that
caawiya
time, we'll still have
iskuullada
some type of programming, but
marka
it won't be,
programyo kala
it
duwan
won't
waan
be that
haysanaa
70%
weli
staff. But again, our effort is to make sure that we do
qorsheenu
have
waxa weeye
in-person.
waa inaan
So
in-person
we're right
haysano
now reaching out to all of our community partners that are currently in our schools, which is in one of the slides here.
marka taasoo la mid
Our
ah
high school credit recovery will still
marka
continue as
iskuulka
it normally has
recoveryga
during
weli way
winter break and
socotaa
spring break. And then, of course, looking to expand elementary options for our
marka
students.
elementaryga
So
qaabka
again,
kalena fiirino
I
kala
would
waaye
appreciate any board support
waad
or community
mahadsantihiin board
support so that we can
supportkiina
have those
dhammaantiin
offerings for our students at least that first week of winter break, and then going into spring break for sure. I think it's one thing that I believe that some of our students and some of
marka
our
ardayda
families
qaar iyo
and
qoysaska
parents,
qaar
caregivers really appreciate having
bay
a place
muhiim u
for
tahay
students to go during that long stretch of no
marka
school,
taas
but
markay
making
tahay
sure that we
xilliga
have facilities,
waa inaan
staffing,
xaqiijino
often you need
shaqaalaha iyo
engineers,
inay
and
taalo
you know, we'd like to be able to serve food, so then food
cunto inaan
service. So,
siino food service
and
u
again,
yaalo
that's all operational and technical. But
marka
if
waa
we're going to
qaabka
create that space for students,
technicalka
I
wax
want
loo
it to
wada
be the best
yataa
place for
iyada
students, and
ay
not just
iskuullada
something
in
we
meesha
do.
ugu
So,
fiican
again,
inaan
appreciate
uga
any
dhigno
support
weeye
that we could get with that, but we are
marka
planning
waan
right
heli
now
karaa
for
laakiin
the breaks
qorshaha
within our
waan
extended summer
sameynaynaa
programming.
xilliga summer programka
Dr. Jordan?
Jordan
Thank you, Chair Ellison.
Allison,
Just to kind
waad
of
mahadsan
piggyback on
tahay
what Directors Elamine and Cirio had said.
Syria means ay dhaheen
Yeah, with the online tutor training, I mean, I know that's not the best fit for everyone.
marka
but,
taa ruux walba ma fiicno
when it comes to devices,
marka deviceska laga
you know,
hadlo
there are some sites. Okay, so a couple of sites I've been to last year, teachers were allowed to sign out the devices in their
macallimiinta waa loo
classroom.
talagalay inay istaagaan halkaas
For that 1 hour that student was there, in case a student didn't have a device or they
hadduu
forgot it at
ardaygu
their parents'
computer
house, they have
haysanin aan
custodial
guriga la soo
arrangements, et
tageen
cetera, et cetera. And teachers found that, a couple of sites I've been to, the teachers found that that system worked because they knew the student, knew that the student had that device, and they would give it back at the end of that hour. That worked last year. However, this year at some sites, what's happened is the district has said, somebody here in this building has said, we're not going to do that this year. We're going to take it all away from the teachers and we're going to put it into the library. So you have to go to the walk down to the library.
marka qof
You have to
meesha
sign it
fadhiya
out.
library-ga
And
inaan
you
ka
can keep
dhigno
it all
la
day, or you
seexo
can bring it back, and
waa inaan
sometimes
soo
more often than not,
noqoto
those devices are not being returned or
marka la
tracked
soo
properly,
waa in la
and we're losing
ogaado
devices.
meesha wax jiro
And I'm just kind of curious to know who made that decision.
marka go-aanka ruuxa
And did
sameeyey
they
waan
consult
la
teachers and say
yaabanahay
what system actually works for you? So
macallimiinta
you
meela
have
shaqeeyeen
accountability
maxay
for
idiin
your students, make sure the
shaqeeya
students are accountable for the
ardayda inay
devices that we
mas-uuliyadda
are loaning them
baalka
for the hour.
qaataan iyo saacadaas
Because, you know, I was at a school where a student did not have a device.
marka
And the
iskuul
student happened to be
computer bay
one
ardayda
of only a
haysanin
couple
ay
students of
arkeen
color in this classroom.
ayagoo
And
ka
he did
mid
not
ah
have a
madowga
device.
ayuu ahaa mayba haysanin
Everybody else did.
computer
And this student went to the library, but
marka
because
qofkan
of
library-gu
the
aaday
situation I just described,
marka sidaan
this
idiin
student didn't
sheegay
have a device. There was
computer
no
ma
device
haysanin
left in that building for this student
marka
to
meesha
have.
uga tegayba ma garanayo
So that student sat there the entire classroom
marka
time and
class-taanka
just
wuu taagnaa
sat there. When I went in
wuu
the
sii
classroom
taagnaa
with
classroom-kan aaday
the administrator of that school, that student was
maamulaha
just sitting
oo
there.
la hadlay
Had
meesha iska
nothing to
fadhiyey
do.
waxba
because they
muu
didn't have a
samaynaynin
device. For whatever
computer
reason.
muu samaynin
And the
sabab
student
jirtaba
control, whatever. I don't really want to get
marka
into it.
anigu ma ogin
But
arrintaas iga galaba ma
had
rabin
the protocol from last year been in place,
laakiin ba
where the
haddii
teachers are
qorshaha ay
responsible for the
sanadkii hore
devices
jiro
in
markuu
that specific
macallimiintu ay
room,
mas-uulka
that specific
kombiyuutarada
hour,
ka
and that
ahaayeen
specific day, that student would have had a device.
kombiyuutarka ilmaha weeli lahaa
Just sitting there. Now, I know that's not your fault, or I
qaladka
don't
adiga
know.
maridi waan
But
ogahay ma ogin
all I'm saying is that we can't allow that to
marka
happen. I mean,
arrintan
our
ma
students
yeeli
of color
kara inay
are already
dhacdo
falling apart.
ilmaha
You
madowga
know,
way
they're falling
mar hadday
behind, they have,
hooseeyaan
you know, things that are beyond their control. control, mental health. I mean, it's things that are outside of the classroom.
maskax ahaan bay u dhimanayaan baa la leeyahay
But we're trying our best, trying
marka
our
waan
best to do that.
sameynaynaa sida ugu
I
wanaagsan
mean, if we
inaan
can't,
sameyno
I mean, we have to be able to provide them the
waa inaan
resources.
siino resourceka ay u baahan
And
yihiin
so I would just like to see that somehow we can return.
marka
to what
waxaan
was working
doonayaa
for
qaabkii
teachers
hore
last year in
ee
school.
hawshu
I don't care
socotay
if it's at Washburn, I
inaanu
don't care if
soconno
it's at
Washburn
Page,
Isbuuca iyo
Sanford, wherever these
Ka
systems
shaqo ku
were, I've
meli
witnessed
midkuu
them
dooni
that
baa
were
ado
working last year.
marka
Why
sanadkii
not
hore
just go back to
shaqeynay
what was working?
sidii hore aan ugu
And we're
celiyey
keeping track of our Chromebooks and our devices and
marka
taxpayers'
kombiyuutarada
dollars for you conservatively conscious financial people. But, I mean, we have to, you know, get, you know, if we want to extend an olive branch to our teachers and to our community and say, yes, we are willing to trust our people with the devices. They know what's best for their students. They know their students. Why not just let them do it? You know, I don't know why we keep putting up, to me, it just seems like a roadblock. You know, that we just keep throwing up. And it sounds, I know it sounds really, I know it sounds really trite about it, but come on, you know, I was actually really mad leaving that classroom. Color in that classroom just sitting. Nobody, you know, the teacher, you know, I'm sure tried her hardest to find that student a device, but if we're just letting them fly out of the library, you know, and it's a big school that I was at. It's not no K-5 school or nothing. This was a big school. I just think that we need to really just simplify things. And I think that's pretty simple. It's not that hard to do, I don't think. I've seen it done at Sanford. I've seen it done at other schools where they have the carts and they're locked up and the teachers give them out and they get them back. When did that stop? When did that go away? You know, I just do not like to see a student of color without a device in a predominantly white classroom where everyone else does. I don't know how that's fair. I don't think that's right. I think we need to correct that. Not tomorrow, not tonight, but pretty soon. Happening. One last thing with the enrollment. You know, the official projections won't come in till what, end of the month? So if we're looking at even just the projected numbers that we have tonight, how is that going to affect implementing some of these programs? How is that going to kind of slow them down? Are they, I mean, are we just, I don't know. How does that work? I mean, what would we look at, you know, if we're losing, if we have to have a budget adjustment? I mean, does that affect implementation of some of these programs? I know it's kind of off-the-wall kind of question, but I'm just kind of curious how that's going to affect implementing some of these big things that we're starting to do. You guys are starting to do.
Yeah, I can definitely start with that one. You know, whenever we see a decrease in enrollment, that's a decrease in money for the district, absolutely. So then we get into conversations about what are our priorities and what we can. And so those will be continued conversations as we go through this next budget season, as we're looking at, are we really budgeting for the status quo? Are we budgeting for our strategic plan? And that's a really tough conversation that we're going to have this year. As we move forward. So I think it's an excellent point to bring up, and it's a reality that we have to face. And it's the reason why I've been as transparent as I have about the enrollment numbers, because we are going to have to. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and it was a great conversation. Interest in literacy and the trainings that our staff are going through. And I heard how it's a burden for some of our staff members to get all these teachers in there. And then I think about partners and maybe swimming upstream and looking, if we find a program that is very effective for most or all of our students, maybe we start talking to teacher prep programs about, hey, this is something, you know, we have found we had to teach our teachers after they came and started with us. Maybe this is something we can start to teachers don't need to be teaching all day and then having to worry about family and then doing additional training so that they can help our students. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the policy committee report. We're just going to keep moving, guys. Are we okay? All right. Policy committee chair Ince, please go ahead with your report.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Policy Committee has referred one policy revision to the board tonight for the first reading. The changes in the revision of policy 1692, and that was something that we recommended at the policy committee. Included suggested changes from the recently conducted equity consideration process. So the revisions clarify the roles and responsibilities of the site council, and they make improvements to operations to improve accessibility, inclusivity for that critical the site councils, which are the really important advisory committees. So that concludes the policy committee.
Thank you very much, directors. Are there any questions for the policy committee report? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Chair Inns and committee members for the work on this policy. We will see that, like Chair Inns said, we will see that next month. We will be voting on that next month. Next, we're going to move on to action items. We'll first begin with the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes routine items that do not involve major policy, budget, or taxing decisions, bond awards, or items related to the superintendent's contract or evaluation. Director Caprini, will you please move approval of this item? Can I get a second? Second. Approval of the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries and the consent agenda is approved. The next item is revision of policy 4016, as Chair Inns referred to, on the Family Medical Leave Act. Director Inns, will you please get a motion, will you please give us a motion to approve this resolution, which is, yes. This is a different one, yes.
Motion to approve is a revision.
And this is for Family Medical Leave Act. Labeled as 2022-54. Resolution 2022-54, revising policy 4016 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries and policy revision is approved. Our final item this evening is a time for directors to give a brief update on the committees they chair or any other board-related activities. Directors, if you have comments, please hit your request to speak button, and I'll run through the list. Student Representative Wesson.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to provide an update on our citywide student leadership board. We had our kickoff event today during the school day. A lot of great students came together to kind of form relationships and get ready for this important year in citywide. Superintendent Cox joined us along with some familiar faces on the cabinet, joined citywide members to have a conversation just to get to know members and get to form relationships. I think it was a really great time, and I look forward to seeing what else we can do this year.
Thank you. Director Caprini.
Oh, thank you. Minnesota School Board Association. Our last meeting was last Saturday, Sunday. And we discussed the resolutions for the legislative session. So, looking forward to working with my colleagues in, I think it's December. Legislative conversation. Folks from all over the state. The other thing I wanted to mention, we're all aware that it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month and Domestic Violence. A very dear heart friend of mine is having an event on October 22nd at Park Nicollet, St. Louis Park, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. We're going to be doing free breast examinations. And also Phyllis Wheatley is hosting a domestic violence forum October 28th from 4:30 to 7. So I hope you can try and make it to that. The last thing is, I want to say to my bookie in high school. There we go. North and Henry are undefeated, and I couldn't be prouder. So I just want to make sure that everyone gives a big shout out to our bookie in high schools. Super proud. Thanks. I'm done.
Thank you. Director Arneson.
Thanks. I have a YCB update, Youth Coordinating Board. We heard tonight that goal 2 of the strategic plan is the student well-being part where youth enrichment program. We want it to be appropriately resourced and staffed across MPS. That was a goal. And so per our joint meeting that we had in August with the Park Board, the discussion there, I mentioned the YCB is assisting in their review of existing options at our schools with the intent to provide parks and schools information about sites that could use strategic investment, either financial or with potential partners that could be a good fit. So both entities are now in agreement, and so we mentioned I would be giving updates at this time. So the staff from the parks and schools are supposed to be meeting with the YCB immediately after MEA to gather initial info and to plan their next steps. So our ask is to have this kind of complete so that they're in time to make adjustments even mid-year. So I just wanted to update the colleagues that that discussion is continuing to happen and move forward.
Okay, thank you. Director Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to share with you, and I'm sure you are aware, the Council of Great City Schools Conference will take place next week in Orlando, Florida. And the Council brings together the 77 large school districts. And most of the people who will be attending are the people like superintendents, school board members, and so on. So I just like to share with you that great opportunity for us to enhance our knowledge and skills of how to govern this school district. And I also like to share with you, I lost a friend of mine last week, and he was a great leader. His name was Mukhtar Thakur. He recently retired from Minnesota Department of Transportation, and he was a great community leader. And I just want to, on our behalf, pass our condolences to his family. There are a lot of great leaders that whom we have lost past few years due to some of them due to COVID, some of them some other accidents. And we went through a lot. Despite we're trying to improve our education system here, but also we need to recognize that the communities are going through a lot. And all of us, we need to do some self-care. Despite really sometimes, we go through a tough time. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Ali. Director Surya?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am honored to be the representative for the school board in the City Planning Commission. That requires a lot of time. I'm filling in for the school board member that resigned, so I attended my very first meeting last Monday. So it's exciting. Looking forward to new adventures. Thank you.
Thank you. I can talk about, there was a number of activities throughout the district that I attended, the groundbreaking for Career Tech Ed, the Festival Day Emerson. I went to Latino Parent Advisory Committee, Special Ed Advisory Committee, the Black Parent Advisory Committee, our Hmong Advisory Committee. I did not attend SOMALI. But these parent advisory committees meet every month. So it's something you're interested in. You can find the day and time on our website. I would highly encourage folks to get involved that way. Some are meeting still virtually, some are meeting in person, but it's on the website. I went to the Urban Debate League and watched students debate NATO, which was a lot of fun. And then I just attended, we all did, last week, our first superintendent search committee meeting. I want to remind folks that the board will now meet the first Tuesday of the month to conduct superintendent search work. At our meeting last week, we heard from a representative from the Council of Great City Schools, the conference we're about to attend, who provided us with national context and best practices for superintendent searches. Video of that meeting and the document he shared with us, along with many other resources on the superintendent search process, can be found on our website at board.mpls.k12.mn.us/SUPT-search. That's SUPT search, SEARCH. Our next superintendent search meeting is November 1st. We'll review proposals for contracted community engagement facilitator to support our efforts. We're seeking this community engagement facilitator to provide support to board members who will be hosting listening sessions in community in November, December 2022 as part of the superintendent search process. Examples of support include arranging meeting logistics, including communications, note-taking, and compiling raw and sorted qualitative data. If you or someone you know is able to help us with that, proposals are due October 17th, and the request for proposal can be found on the superintendent search website. That concludes our agenda for this meeting for today. Our next meeting will be Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, October 25th at 6 p.m. Without objection, I will now adjourn this meeting. Good night, everyone.
So